Magandang hapon po.
Thank you, Rep. Roque.
Madam Speaker,
Yes, Majority Floor Leader.
we move for the recognition of the gentleman from the Lone District of Ifugao, the Honorable Teddy Bagilat. So moved, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Bagilat is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Mr. President, yung mga gusto kong tanungin ay karamihan ng naitanong. Ngunit hindi sapat yung mga sagot. Siguro yun dahil sa kakulangan ng panahon. No? Pero siguro follow-up na lang o follow-through. No? On the first issue, yung nabanggit kanina nila Secretary Lorenzana, na maaari nilang i-recommend sa ating Pangulo na i-lift yung martial law. Gusto ko sana nila Secretary, o kaya sina Secretary Esperon, what would be the factual basis for you to recommend to the President that Congress rescinds or we lift the declaration of martial law in Mindanao? Yung actual basis, para meron naman po tayong parameters kung sakasakaling magpapasya tayo na kinakailangan ng tapusin yung martial law sa Mindanao.
Magandang hapon po.
Magandang hapon po, sir.
Magamalamyo po. The basis for our recommendation would be partly due to the existing and actual threat. Nasabi po natin na ang mga Abu Sayyaf at Maute at iba pang grupo ay nagsama-sama pala. Sa makatuwid, kung mayroon mang 400 na Abu Sayyaf doon sa Sulu, at mayroon pang mga 100 plus naman doon sa Basilat at iba pang lugar, ito ay maaari magsama-sama sa kagyat na panahon kung hindi natin mababantayan. Kaya nga po, para mabantayan natin ito, bigyan nyo kami ng pagkakataon at sapat na kapangyarihan upang pigilin sila na magsama-sama.
Madam Speaker, I hope that the Secretary also considers the fact that the other groups that were mentioned, Abu Sayyaf, sa tingin ko naman, hindi naman sila po nagsimula bilang rebelde, kundi they were branded as bandits. No? Kasi po sa Mindanao, napakaraming grupo. No? And the basis of the declaration of martial law is because of actual rebellion started by the Maute gang. So sana po sa ating intelligence, hindi naman po lahat ng mga grupo ay sabihin na natin o bansagin na natin na kasama sa Maute dahil hindi naman po talaga actual rebellion yung kanilang hinahangad, kundi just plain banditry, Madam Speaker, Mr. President.
Sa totoo lang po, itong mga dating Abu Sayyaf, nagsimula nga sila sa totoo lang, nagsimula pa ang mga iba dyan sa Moro National Liberation Front at Moro Islamic Liberation Front. Pero sila ay tumiwalag at iba na ngayon ang kanilang ginagawa. Sila ay, in fact, they have pledged allegiance to ISIS, many of them.
That is based on your intelligence, po, yung
Yes,
latest
and
intelligence.
this is validated by intelligence not only from our side but also from the intelligence reports of other countries and our allies.
Siguro, kaakibat na tanong, no? Can it also be possible na if based on your assessment, ilimit natin yung scope ng martial law? Let's say not necessarily the lifting of martial law, but let's say after 3 months, sa tingin ninyo, contained naman yung threat, so hindi na kinakailangan siguro buong isla ng Mindanao ang bisa ng martial law. Would it be possible that you can also recommend that,
In fact,
Mr. Secretary?
yes, Mr. President, that is always possible. It is always desirable to limit the scope of the geographical scope of martial law. But current developments, very recent developments, would tell us that much of our efforts is in Malawi, and we have left vacant or with few forces. We are left with very thin
Yes.
deployment of forces in other areas. Take, for example, Gihulngan in the Visayas. They just raided the municipality there. These are the NPA. In Lianga, a group there raided a small plantation, burned trucks, and they cut standing bananas.
Yun nga po yung ano eh.
So, ibig sabihin, hindi na lang actually mauti ang nagkakaroon ng aksyon na dapat nating alagaan. It is not the NPA that we are aiming at, but nakakaapekto rin ito. Yung mag-iitik doon sa North Cotabato, hinihingan ng itlog. Eh, kailangan din natin protektahan yung mga taong yun. Kaya lang, nawala yung tropa natin doon sa Cotabato.
That's precisely my point, Madam Speaker, Mr. President. No, na I would assume that majority of the armed forces are now in Mindanao.
Oh,
And
well,
we are saying that for the next 5 months, ang deployment po nung, let's say, 50, 60, 70% ng armed forces ay nasa Mindanao. Now, the
Mga
Good
40%
Secretary
po.
has already mentioned that there are also other internal security threats in the country. Tulad po sa amin sa Northern Luzon, tila lumalakas po yung NPA doon po sa amin at sila rin po ay nagmamobilize. Lalong-lalo na ngayon na medyo canceled yung peace talks natin with the NDF. So ang tanong ko po, Madam Speaker, is how would the extension of martial law affect the capability of the military to contain other internal security threats in the entire country, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, and including external threats, which is also part of the mandate of the AFP.
Definitely, apektado ang deployment ng armed forces, lalo na kung sa Quirino ay meron din bombing dyan, or mga pananambang, or other kinds of depredation, like in Gumaca, Quezon, 5 truck, construction equipment ang sinunog dyan. But, let us concentrate in Mindanao. Anyway, we can take care of there will be depredations. Ginagawa naman talaga ng NPA noon pa yan. And it's just that they are intensifying their tactical operations. We can still take care of that, but allow us to concentrate on Mindanao, allow us to optimize our forces, and give us the enabling legal platform to undertake some actions that we could not do without martial law.
Okay.
Maraming casualties, mababawasan ito. Mas dadami ang casualties din ng civilian, mababawasan ito kung pagbibigyan niyo kami. Kung hindi lang kami maingat at kung talaga namang yung mga tropa natin ay hindi iniisip ang civilian, palagay ko mas malala pa. Look at what happened in the Zamboanga siege. Yung karapatan ng mga refugees doon, hanggang ngayon, hindi rin natin nalalagyan ng lunas. Eh, kaya ayaw din namin na lumala yung Marawi.
Well, I am glad, Madam Speaker, that the Secretary is open to possibly recommending, if in case we extend to December, possible lifting of martial law. Because I believe that martial law is an extreme solution or extreme action to an extreme problem. No? Nabanggit nga kanina na ano yung epekto nito sa ekonomiya. And will the security officials be willing to or be open to possible recommendations from, let's say, the DTI or the Department of Tourism kung sa tingin nila ay nakaka-apekto na ito sa ating ekonomiya, hindi lang sa Mindanao, kundi sa buong bansa, dahil nga mayroong imahe na ang Pilipinas ay under siege because of the declaration of martial law.
Mr. President, we are very conscious about the economic effects of this Marawi incident. Kung kaya nga yung iligan na katabing-katabi ng Marawi ay ating ginagwardyahan. Pumunta kayo sa iligan ngayon, gumagana pa rin yung 2 cement plants. Gumagana pa rin yung ibang factory doon. Exactly because we are also taking precautionary measures to guard all of these urban centers, these commercial areas. Kaya kung ang pag-uusapan natin ay pagpapayabong ng komersyo, ay magkasama po tayo dyan.
Okay. Huling tanong na po, no? Balikan natin po yung usaping karapatang pantao, no? At nabanggit na nga kanina na may mga paglabag sa karapatang pantao. Siguro ang aking interest lang is ano ba ang ating mekanismo or grievance mechanism under martial law na kung saan maaaring ilapit sa administrator ang mga reports on human rights violations, no? Do we coordinate with the Commission on Human Rights? Do we immediately approach the administrator or the implementer? Ano pong proseso? Meron po tayong mekanismo?
Sa ganang yan po ay, we are confident of course na yung ating mga sundalo sa Marawi ay may disiplina sa kanilang operations maski na mahirap. I should probably give back to you again, the Chief of Staff, to talk about how we observe human rights, how the soldiers, how our troopers are observing human rights.
Salamat po. Sa defense establishment, pati po sa Armed Forces of the Philippines, meron po kaming kinrate na mga opisina mula po sa General Headquarters hanggang doon sa batalyon. Meron pong tinatawag dito na Office of the Human Rights Officer. Hanggang sa division, hanggang sa batalyon, mayroon pong Human Rights Officer. Dito po pwedeng dumulog. Doon sa Marawi, yung pong commander ng ating Task Force Ranao, nandun sa provincial capital, siya nagte-take care ng mga cleared areas, pwedeng pong dumulog din doon. Meron din po tayong Commission of Human Rights Regional Offices na pwedeng pagdulugan. Sa amin po mga pagsasanay, sa training namin, formal at informal na training, lagi pong may module ng human rights module para siguraduhin po na naka-inculcate sa mga tao natin. Alam po ninyo, habang nag-uusap tayo dito, may nagaganap na labanan ngayon sa Marawi. 100 na po yung ating killed in action mula kagabi. Nadagdagan po ito ngayon ng 5 at 26 na sugatan. Yan po ang labanan natin ngayon. Pero kahit po gaano karami ang naging casualty sa aming panig, never nag-isip kami nagagawa ng anumang human rights violation. Yung 46 na sibilyan na namatay, mga Mauti ISIS po ang pumatay dito at kami ang nakapagdala ng kanilang mga kadaver papunta dito sa cleared areas. Kaya po alisin po natin yung pag-iisip na ang martial law ay magdudulot ng maraming human rights violation. Karamihan po ay speculation. Kaya nga sabi namin, nakahanda kami sa anumang complaint at sasagutin natin. At ako po mismo, I will ensure na parurusahan natin kung meron pong lalabag ng ganyang mga karapatang pantao.
Thank you very much, Mr. General, and I'm very happy that you have recognized the importance of respecting the rights of our people. Kasi nga, sa tingin ko, yung ating karanasan sa martial law, nakapagdulot po ng masamang karanasan. At dahil po dumadami ang mga, kung sakasakali pong may mga human rights abuses po, mas dadami po ang mga terorista. Mas mamarami po ang mararadicalize. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Thank you.
Madam Speaker, I move that we recognize Representative Gary Alejano of Party List Magdalo for his interpellation.
The Honorable Alejano is recognized.
Maraming salamat po. Magandang hapon, Madam Speaker, Senate President, to the resource persons. Magandang hapon po. Unang-una, nais ko pong i-relay po sa ating Department of National Defense at Armed Forces of the Philippines ang aking simpatiya at pagsuporta sa ating Armed Forces na nakikipaglaban ngayon sa Marawi. And furthermore, I would like to thank you for your service to the country. Maraming salamat po, sir. Meron lang po ako mga katanungan dahil bilang dating sundalo, may mga bagay na pwede namang gawin kahit wala pong martial law. Kaya nga ayoko naman sanang i-expose ang ating mga sundalo o prolong exposures sa ganitong sistema dahil hindi natin maiwasan ang pwedeng abuso na mangyari. Magtatanong lang po ako sana kay General Anyo po, sir.
Yes, Your Honor.
Magandang hapon po, General Anyo, sir.
Magandang hapon po.
Because of the increased operational tempo in Mindanao, ang ibang mga units po sa Visayas at saka sa Luzon po ay pinadala sa Mindanao. And in the process po, sir, yung mga lugar na kanilang binakintihan ay nagagamit po yan ng New People's Army upang magparami ng kanilang puwersa, hindi lamang magparami ng kanilang puwersa, kundi pumatay, mag-ambush, at mag-raid ng mga police station. So ano pong ating nakikitang kaparaanan ho dito dahil nadi-displace po yung ating mga units away from their area of operations at nababakante ito laban po sa New People's Army.
Totoo po yung inyong obserbasyon na nung pagkaroon po ng Malawi crisis ay sinamantala ito ng New People's Army at nag-declare pa sila ng nationwide offensive all over the country before the SONA. Instead sana napakinggan nila yung simpatiya ng mga tao na magtulong-tulong para tapusin itong Malawi crisis ay pinagsasamantalan pa nila yung pagkakataon. Subalit, mayroon din po tayo mga kahanda ang ginawa dyan. Katulad po sa mga naiwang lugar ng mga tropa natin sa area ng Luzon at Visayas, magkatulong po ang PNP at saka natitirang Armed Forces Troopers through the Joint Peace and Security Coordinating Committee na binuo para pangalagaan itong mga naiwang lugar. Ang kagustuhan po natin ay ma-resolve kaagad natin itong Malawi crisis para sa ganon, maibalik din po kaagad natin ang mga tropang ito na kinuha natin na tumutulong ngayon sa Malawi. Sa ngayon po, 21 batalyons ang binuo natin dito sa Malawi para tapusin kaagad. Malaki pong tropa yan na kinuha natin sa iba't ibang lugar. Kaya nga po sa tulong din sana ng martial law, ay masagawa natin yung mabilisang operasyon at maibalik sa normalcy. Naghingi po kami ng apology sa mga local government sa ibang lugar na kung saan pinulaut natin ang mga sundalo. Sa madaling panahon po, ibabalik natin kaagad yan. At i-address po natin ang mga karasang ginagawa ng CPP-NPA.
Yun po yung ating pag-aalala dahil makikita natin na baka maging overstretch ang ating armed forces. Mag-extend ho tayo ng martial law sa Mindanao, doon po yung focus at naiiwanan po natin yung mga areas so na especially malakas po yung presence ng NPA. In fact, yung mga areas that were cleared before by the armed forces are now being retaken by the New People's Army at nagpaparami po sila. So, ang ayaw lang po natin na pagkatapos po ng Malawi ay haharap tayo sa isang malakas at dumami na New People's Army. So, meron po kayong plano, sir, na dagdagan yung ating puwersa when it comes to recruitment po?
Opo. Inaproban po ng ating Pangulo yung recruitment ng additional 10,000 soldiers at ongoing na po ang proseso dito. Sa loob po ng 18 buwan ay mabubuo natin yung 10,000 na additional na sundalo natin. Ito po ay sapat para mabigyan natin ng mga personnel ang iba't ibang unit na nakikipaglaban sa iba't ibang lugar. Yun naman pong hinihingi namin hanggang December 31, para sa amin po ay ito isang ample time. Pero kung ito po ay magagawa namin kaagad sa madaling panahon, kami na rin po ang gagawa ng inisyatiba para magrekomenda na bumalik sa normal at ilip ang martial law. Makakaasa po kayo dyan.
Maraming salamat po, sir. Ang sunod po na aking tanong ay natanong na rin pero diinan ko lang ng konti because of these unexpected operations in Malawi, yung nakaalat po na reserve for our armed forces ay nagagamit. And we don't know that there might be some Malawi siege like in other places, baka po kukulangin ang ating reserve sa bala, sa fuel, sa pagkain, sa kagamitan ng ating armed forces. Meron na pong naka-in place na request for supplemental budget para hindi po pwedeng maubusan ang ating armed forces.
Maraming salamat po. Gagawin po namin yan kaagad. Sa ngayon po ay nagkakaroon kami ng mga emergency procurement para pambili ng mga bala na pangpalit sa mga ginagamit natin at tumutulong po ang ating national leadership, particularly po ang ating Pangulo. Pero napakalaking tulong po sa amin kung magkakaroon ng supplemental budget para po laging ma-maintain natin ang ating readiness. Hindi lamang po sa internal, pati po sa external defense natin.
Salamat po. I just would like to state sa ating mga kasamahan na hindi po bottomless ang bala at resources ng ating armed forces. Nangyari na yan before and we don't want na darating po tayo dyan sa... Kaya nga dapat suportahan po natin ang any request for supplemental budget for our armed forces. Ang sunod ko pong tanong, sir, alam ko po itong Abu Sayyaf, Mauting, BIFF, Ansar Khalifa, ito po ay matagalan natin ino-operate and I believe we have holdings on these groups. Even if we have so many numbers of Abusayap, in Basilan, Sulu, hindi naman ito nag-a-add up sa Marawi talaga. In fact, yung Marawi, matagal na ho natin ino-operate ito, binubugbog ho natin sa Butig, Piagapo, and marami na rin nalagas sa kanila. Ang pagsasamay-samahin nga, hindi nga sila ganong karami. Ang punto ko lang ngayon po, sir, hindi pa rin maiwasan na in spite of the intelligence efforts of our armed forces, the fact, sir, na pumasok sa Marawi, ano kaya pong dahilan? Bakit hindi ho natin napigilan po sila?
Totoo po yun. Matagal natin kinokompronto yung iba't ibang grupo, Abu Sayyaf, BIFF, Maute. Pero nung mga setting po na yon, sila ay nandun lamang sa bundok at inaatake natin sila, nagkakaroon ng operasyon. Katulad po nung January, nagkaroon po tayo ng isang malaking operasyon dito po sa May Butig, na kung saan 15 yung namatay at nasugatan si Apilon. Noong pong April, meron po tayong malaking operasyon dito sa Piagapo, na 37 ang napatay dito. Pero ito po ay mga sa bundok na labanan. Kung yan po ang setting ng ating operational environment, hindi na po natin kailangan ng martial law. Pero nung adapt po sila sa Mosul type, hybrid urban warfare, na kung saan willing silang patayin lahat na makita nilang sibilyan, sunugin lahat ng building, ransakin yung mga bangko at mga bahay, ito po ay ibang usapan. Hindi na po ito kakayanin ng ordinaryong pakikipaglaban. Kailangan na po natin dito ng martial law. Dapat, dahil talaga pong rebellion ang nagaganap, kung sasabihin pa natin dahil sa presence ng mga foreign fighters, parang invasion po ang nangyayari. Kaya po tayo nagkaroon ng martial law. Pero once ma-degrade po natin itong mga kalaban na to, at maitaboy natin uli sila sa mga traditional na lugar, sa mga bundukin, hindi na po natin kailangan ng martial law. Bakit po sila dumami? Dahil ginamit po nila yung formula ng Mosul na kung saan lahat po ng nire-recruit nila ay pinangukuhaan nila ng mga pera. 15,000 sa bagong recruit. Kapag na-occupy yung Marawi, 20,000. Saan po nila kukunin yon? Mga pera na galing sa Middle East at saka sa mga na-loot at naransak nila na bangko at mga bahay ng mga private citizens sa Marawi.
Naintindihan ko po.
Honorable Alejano, your time is up.
One more
One
question
last
po.
question and one short answer from the resource person.
Yes, Sir Honor.
General Anyo, sir, I believe that after the Marawi siege, we had Zamboanga siege before, and now we have Marawi siege. I hope that the armed forces would be able to come up with a clear doctrine on military operations in urban terrain. At ang kaakibat ng mga kagamitan at training ay maibigay po natin sa ating armed forces para po maiwasan ho natin yung, I believe, marami pang kakulangan ng ating armed forces, especially yung mga issues na merong mga friendly fires, no? May mga casualties po tayo. I hope po pagkatapos po nito ay magkaroon po ng assessment so that we can correct the mistakes. At the same time, we can procure proper military materials for our armed forces. So maraming salamat po, sir, at magandang hapon po.
Maraming salamat po, Congressman Alejano. At gagawin po namin lahat yan. Salamat po.
Majority Floor Leader.
Madam Speaker, we move for the recognition of the lady from the 6th District of Manila, the Honorable Sandy Ocampo. So move, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Sandy Ocampo is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. President. I rise to voice the sentiments of the Maranaos residing in Manila to the members of this chamber. The original settlers from the conflict of Muslim Mindanao in the early 70s are in my district, just a mere minute away from Malacanang. They want this war to end, and most of all, they want to return home. They want to start to rebuild and pick up their lives again, but we all know that things have changed and the complexion can never be the same again. The rude awakening and accepting the reality that the seeds of ISIS in the Middle East has inspired our own and has taken root in our midst, in our land, in our region of Southeast Asia, wherein two countries that are near the Philippines are predominantly Muslims. But because of the hardship of being uprooted from their homes in Marawi and contemplating the loss of property and other assets of displaced residents of Marawi, they just want this misery to end. Hindi na po importante sa kanila ang puspusang dahilan kung bakit nagsimula itong problema sa Marawi o ang puspusang ginagawa ng gobyerno at ng ating sandatang militar upang supilin ang Mauti Group. They just want to get their lives back and begin the reconstruction that the President promised. Madam Speaker, sana wag nating makalimutan yung naging experience ng Iraq. Nung tinanggal sa Saddam, nasira yung kanilang bayan, hindi masustenan ng Amerika ang pag-reconstruct ng Iraq dahil sa laki ng mga Amerikanong namamatay sa gera na yon, ay binitawan nila ang reconstruction ng Iraq. Ang punto ko po rito ay napakalaki po ang naging kasiraan sa Marawi. At sa totoo niyan, maraming mga distrito sa ibang parte ng ating bansa ang nakasugal, nakataya din po sa reconstruction ng Marawi. Ang gusto ko lang pong malaman, dahil kanina nabanggit ng isang tagapagsalita ng panel ng gobyerno natin na sa ilang maikling panahon ay marirecover na rin po ang ilang areang holdouts ng Mauti Group, no? Ano po bang reconstruction program? Anong nakalaang pondo? Kailan sisimulan? Sana matuto rin po tayo sa naging experience natin sa Yolanda kung saan hindi po natin naitayo ang mga paglilipatang mga bahay na ipinangako ng gobyerno. Hindi po natin gustong makita na ito pong Marawi ay maging recruiting na lugar upang po maipagpatuloy ang problema na ganito. So, sa akin lang po ay habang tatapusin po ng gobyerno, sinusuportahan ko po ang pagpapalawig ng martial law sa Mindanao, pero dapat po ay nakahanda na po ang reconstruction efforts ng gobyerno na masusustira natin at hindi po mapag-iiwanan ang talagang malaking kapahamakan na nakita nating nangyari sa syudad ng Marawi na pinakamaunlad na syudad ng mga Muslim sa buong Mindanao. Thank you.
Madam Speaker,
Yes,
Mr. President, meron na po tayong administrative order na galing kay Presidente na nagtatayo ng Task Force Bangon Marawi. Ito po ay kanyang pinirmahan noong pang nakaraang buwan, June. Ito po ay anticipation na matatapos na yung bakbakan doon at maumpisahan na yung rehabilitation sa recovery and reconstruction of Marawi. Nagkaroon na tayo ng organizational meeting, lahat ng mga agencies, 23 government agencies in all. Ang nasa harapan po niyan ay ang Army Engineering Brigades, yung DPWH, DSWD, lahat na ng agencies katulad ng education para sa mga eskwelahan na nasira. Ang una-unahin po natin doon ay ang pagbabalik ng mga infrastructures, mga kalsada muna, matubig, ilaw, at saka maibalik yung mga negosyante para magkaroon ng mga stores doon bago bumalik yung mga mamamayan. Mayroon na rin po tayong programa para sa mga repairs ng mga bahay na nasira. Yun lang, ang malaking sira po rito, Mr. President, Madam Speaker, ay yung Central Business District na nabugbog ng mga bomba natin dahil sa lakas ng resistance ng mga kalaban. Meron na po tayong kanyang, Mr. President, saka Madam Speaker, meron lang nilaan si Presidente, sabi niya, initially naglalaan siya ng 20 billion pesos para sa rehabilitation. Pero ang tingin namin, estimate lang namin sa nakikita ko sa mga aerial photos ng mga nasira ay hindi sapat yun. Pero handa namang tumulong yung mga ibang organisasyon like World Bank, IMF, saka ibang mga bansa, nakarating bansa na nakahandang tumulong sa atin.
Well, Secretary, ang nais ko lang po ay sana alalahanin nyo na lahat kami ay nakataya upang ayusin ang problema at binibigay po namin ang aming suporta. Sana po gawin nyo ng maayos, hindi lang yung pagsusupil ng mga mauti, kung hindi yung pagbabalik sa normal ng buhay ng mga naapektuhan ng rebellion na ito. Dahil po ayaw natin na dito pa maging kuta ng recruitment ang kalaban ng ating puwersa. Maraming salamat po.
Yan pong gagawin namin, Madam.
Thank,
Thank
you,
you, Mr.
Honorable
President.
Ocampo, for your short time.
Madam Speaker.
Yes, Majority Floor Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move for the recognition of the gentleman from the 1st District of Zamboanga City, the Honorable Celso Lobregat. So moved, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Celso Lobregat is hereby recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I would just like to ask the resource persons, and I would refer to the letter of the President to Congress, page 5. In page 5, it says that the ASG, in particular, has been heavily engaging government troops in skirmishes using improvised explosive devices and has been responsible for the ruthless killings of kidnapped victims in Sulu and Basilan. Validated reports disclose that Hapilon and the Motifs have sent an operational fund to ASG sub-leader Furuji Indama in order to launch attacks in Basilan, Cagayan de Oro, General Santos, and Zamboanga City. I am the representative of the 1st District of Zamboanga City, and I would like to ask, how serious is the threat to Zamboanga City?
Sir, totoo po yung mga information na yan. And we are instituting appropriate measures in order to prevent those from happening. If you are able to watch the news several days ago, mayroon po isang bata doon na ini-interview at sinabi niya, 76 sila na pinakawalan at sinabihan ng grupo nila Hapilon na hindi dapat matatapos sa Marawi ang laban na to. Lumabas kayo at ipagpatuloy ninyo ang pagsasagawa ng adikay ng Mauti ISIS. At ito pong mga batang ito ang tinitrain sa pagkandak ng bombing. Ang paggawa ng IED at pagbobomba po ay supplementary dito sa rebelyong ginagawa ng Mauti ISIS para ma-distract po at ma-divert ang attention ng ating military units na nakikipaglaban sa Marawi.
So, sabi pa dito sa liham, Hapilon has also directed the remnants of the AKP to conduct bombings in vital areas in Mindanao, including Lanao Norte. The ASG includes several areas in the arm as its stronghold and has in the past operated in areas in Region 9, my region. Its kidnap for ransom activities covering Sulu, Zamboanga del Norte, and Tawi-Tawi.
Opo, mayroon po tayong mga information na dumating na ganyan po. At so, sabi ko po, i-address po natin ito kasama sa ating effort sa pagpapatupad ng martial law.
So, yan ho ang dahilan. Bakit kailangan i-extend yung martial law hindi lang sa Marawi, pero sa buong Mindanao. Tama ba yan ho?
Tama po.
Okay. Actually, Zamboanga has been mentioned by Secretary Esperon, by First Lieutenant Kemp Faigan, dahil sa Zamboanga Siege. The Zamboanga Siege happened 4 years ago. And tama si Secretary Esperon, sabi niya, we have not yet been able to restore, to rehabilitate the affected areas in Zamboanga City. Perhaps if martial law was declared when there was the Zamboanga siege, the suffering, the loss of lives, the loss of property in Zamboanga would have been less. Would that be also your assessment?
Opo, malaking tulong po yon sana.
Kung napakinggan natin, halos karamihan nagsalita rito sa Kongreso, dahil dito sa Kongreso may demokrasya. Pero karamihan nagsalita, parang they were expressing their concerns of martial law. But ako, tiga Zamboanga, tiga Mindanao, I believe that I am part of a silent majority that supports the extension of martial law. We have heard so many questions about violations of human rights because of martial law. How many human rights have been violated by the terrorist groups? Ilan ho yung napugutan sundalo, napugutan ng ulo? Hindi ba yan violation ng human rights? Ho?
Opo, violation po.
Ilan yung kidnapping na ginawa sa buong Mindanao? Hindi ba yan violation ng human rights?
Violation po.
Yung giyera sa Malawi, ilan yung na-displaced? Ilan yung mga bata hindi makapunta sa eskwela? Kasalanan ba yan ng martial law o kasalanan ng terorista?
Terorista po ang nagsagawa ng mga karahasan dito na siyang dahilan kung bakit napilitang mag-evacuate yung mga kababayan po natin.
Kaya nga, I will appeal to my colleagues. If the extension of martial law will lessen even one day the war in Malawi, if the extension of martial law in Mindanao until December 31st will lessen the sufferings of civilians for even one less day, and even if the extension of martial law will save one more life, let us give the President, the authorities, the police, and the military the chance to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Majority Floor Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move for the recognition of our Honorable Deputy Speaker, the lady from the 1st District of Maguindanao and Cotabato City, the Honorable Bai Sandra Sema. So move, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Bai Sandra Selma is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Noong pong kailangan ng martial law, kami po ay sumuporta. At ngayon nabibigyan ng extension ang martial law, kami rin po ay sumusuporta. Dahil alam po namin na ang labang ito ay laban sa extremism. Ang violent extremism po na ito ay hindi ang narrative ng Mindanao. Ito po ay bagong ideology at hindi po kami sumusuporta dito. Subalit pakiusap lang po sa lahat na sana ang gyerang ito ay gyera sa mga extremist at hindi ho gyera sa lahat ng mamamayang Moro. At sa lahat po ng mga kapatid natin na sa Luzon at Visayas, huwag na po kayong manghingi ng ID para lang sa mga Muslim dahil pinapapanalo po ninyo ang mga extremist. Ingatan po natin ang ating magiging gawain, ang ating magiging reaksyon ay magpapanalo sa mga extremist. Ano po ang laro nila? Gusto po nilang i-divide tayo. Gusto po nilang paghatiin ang mga Muslim at mga Kristiyano. Ingatan po natin ang ating magiging reaksyon ay para sila ay papanalunin. Sinabi ko po noon, sinusuportahan ko ang martial law na ito sa kabila ng ako mismo ay isang biktima ng martial law noong 1970s. Hanggang ngayon, nandito pa rin po yung sharpnel ng baril nung kami po ay maambos in 1970s. Subalit iba po ang martial law noon na tinatawag naming genocide against the Muslims. Ang martial law po ngayon ay para tugisin at hintuan na itong mga violent extremists na sumisira sa narrative ng Mindanao. Kaya sa ating po mga senador, mga congressman, humihingi po kami, pakiusapan po ninyo ang inyong mga local officials na wag natin bigyan ng pagkakataon na manalo itong mga extremist na ito. Ako po ay sumusuporta dahil naniniwala po ako kay Presidente at naniniwala po ako sa Armed Forces of the Philippines. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Honorable Bai Sandra Sema. Majority Floor Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move for the recognition of the gentleman from the 2nd District of Maguindanao, the Honorable Sajid Mangudadatu. So move, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Mangudadatu is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. President and Mr. Speaker, for the recognition. First of all, I'd like to recognize and salute my hand to our government troops, the law enforcers, who willing to die and defend our country to fight against the terrorist and the rebel group, especially in the autonomous region and Muslim Mindanao. I will salute all the troopers who are present today. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, as I observe, some of the interpollators from the lower house and the upper house asked our administrator of the martial law and the implementer about the advantages of the extending of the martial law. And some of them, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, and Mr. President, also mentioned the status of the Maguindanao province. I personally, Mr. Speaker, as the representative in the area of the autonomous region in Muslim Mindanao, especially in Maguindanao province, is personally support the extension of the martial law in Mindanao, as this aim to suppress the existing rebellion and ensure the national security of our nation and safety of our people, especially the civilian population, and as well as combating international terrorism. In fact, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, in the province of Mindanao, there was a endorsement letter made by the provincial government headed by Governor Ismail Toto Mangudato and some of the local chief executives in the 36 towns in the province of Mindanao, ay gumawa po sila ng endorsement letter in support to the extension of the martial law. And some of the lawmakers, I think, against the extension of the martial law is from Luzon. And sana po, ito lang ang request ko from the colleagues from Luzon, Visayas, no, and from the Senate, na kung gusto po natin malaman kung ano talaga yung status, yung situation in Mindanao, especially in ARMM, sana po magtira sila doon. Manirahan po sila para malaman po nila kung ano ang advantages ng magkaroon ng martial law. Kami po, Madam Speaker, Mr. President, during the time of the administration of Congresswoman Macapagal Arroyo, nung nag-declare po siya ng martial law, nung nagkaroon ng Maguindanao Massacre sa Maguindanao Province, ay malaking advantage po, nadidisiplina po ang mga tao sa amin. And in fact, kanina po, nagkaroon po ng joint operation yung ating kasundaluan from 33rd Infantry Battalion and from PIDEA and the 4th Special Action Battalion na nagko-coordinate po sila sa amin bago sila papasok doon. Nagko-coordinate sila, yung mga local leaders po natin ay talagang cooperative sila. Nahuli po nila yung isang barangay captain at nahulihan siya ng hand grenades and some sachets of the shabu and the firearms. So ito po yung nakikita natin mga advantages ng extension ng martial law. Totoo po, nung sinabi ni General Anyo tungkol doon sa urban warfare. Ito, kakaiba po itong nangyayari ngayon. Kung nasa mga liblib na lugar, pwede po yan, isolated area po yan na kaya ng ating government troops na ipagtanggol. Pero ngayon, ang situation ngayon, especially in Malawi, urban warfare ang ginawa po ng mga terorista. Again, as a representative, as a Muslim representative in Mindanao, in Maguindanao Province, sumusuporta po ako for the extension of the martial law. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Mangudato.
Madam Speaker.
Majority Floor Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move for the recognition of the gentleman from the 2nd District of Lanao del Sur, the Honorable Mauyag Jun Papandayan. So move, Madam Speaker.
Honorable Papandayan is recognized.
Auzubillahi minasyaitanirrajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Madam Speaker, ako'y taos puso po nagpapasalamat sa inyong lahat na nandito. Ako po ay naniniwala at umaasa na ang pagkakaroon ng extension o pagkaka-approve ng extension ng martial law ay magdudulot ng katapusan o matudlukan na ang karahasan na ginagawa ni Hapilon at ng mga Mauti. Naririnig po natin ang gawain ni Hapilon, mangidnap, pumatay ng mga foreigner. Hindi po yan kagustuhan ng Islam. Ang ginagawa rin po ng mga Mauti, sinisira nila ang butig dahil sa paghingi nila ng pera sa kanilang uncle na mayor noon. Kaya po nagkaroon ng magulo ang Marawi City. Ang mga taga Marawi po ay biktima lamang po sila ng karahasan na dinudulot ni Hapilon at ng mga Mauti. Sana po ma-approve ang martial law at ito na rin ang maging dahilan at mawakasan na ang kanilang paghahasik ng lagim sa aming lugar. Matagal na pong panahon, mahigit ng 20 taon o 30 taon ginagawa ito ng nilang Hapilon. Sumama pa itong mga Mauti. Sana po ako yung maasa na ma-approve itong extension ng martial law para po ito ay mga matudlukan na. Ako po ay may katanungan sa ating mga military. Kung pwede po. Sa Marawi po ngayon, mayroong na-declare ng mga barangay na safe by the military sa inyo po. Bakit po, baka po pwedeng pauwiin na natin yung mga evacuate sa mga na may-ari ng mga bahay na na-clear na ng mga barangay?
Ito po ay gagawin natin ng paunti-unti at case-to-case basis. Kung makita po natin, dalawa yung area po, yung main battle area kung saan nagaganap yung labanan at yung cleared areas po na sasabihin natin pwede na magsimula unti-unti ang pag-rehabilitate. Pero sa ngayon po ay meron pa rin mga ligaw na bala at mga sniper shots na pupunta po sa mga lugar na ito na panganib sa ating mga kababayan. Actually po, noong Biyernes nung Huwebes po ay pumunta kami doon sa Marawi kasama po si Presidente Duterte. Paglanding pa lang po ng chopper ay mayroon ng putok na tumatama doon sa landing zone. Kaya natagalan pa muna bago maibaba ng chopper si Presidente dahil sa bala na nanggagaling po sa sniper. Yun po ay katabi na ng Campo Ranao. At ang main battle area po ay more than 2 kilometers. Lalo na po yung mga lugar na mas malalapit po dito sa main battle area. Pero pinag-isipan na po natin yan, yung pong ating task force Bangon Marawi under kay Secretary Lorenzana, pinag-uusapan na po kung paano unti-unti ibabalik yung ating mga kababayan sa lugar na safe at cleared po.
Kaya ko po tinatanong yan dahil sa report na natatanggap namin, yung mga na-clear ng barangay ay mayroon pang mga nananakaw na mga gamit ng mga sibilyan. Baka po kung hindi pa sila pwedeng umuwi, madagdagan ng mga security dahil ang nakakapasok lang sa area ay military pero nananakaw pa rin yung mga gamit ng mga sa loob ng bahay. Baka pwede dagdagan po natin ng security para hindi na po manakaw yung mga gamit ng mga may-ari ng mga bahay.
Opo, gagawin natin yan. Paigtingin po natin, dadagdagan natin yung mga pwersa na nagbabantay sa mga cleared areas.
Marami na kasing bahay na nawawala ng laman, yung mga bahay na na-clear na. Tsaka po, meron na akong paki-apila galing sa mga Maranao, sa mga evacuate. Yun pong mga evacuation center natin, nagpapasalamat sila sa ating mga line agencies ng gobyerno dahil tumutulong sila sa pagkain sa DSWD. Pero sana po madagdagan natin yung mga toilet nila, tsaka yung mga kitchen nila, tsaka yung mga paliguan nila dahil yung mga evacuate ay kulang sa facilities at minsan ang kinakain na lang ng mga tao yung noodles na hindi pa luto o kaya yung bigas na hindi pa luto dahil sa wala silang mapaglutuan.
Opo, ipararating po natin sa kinaukulan at through sa Task Force Bangon Marawi, dadagdagan po natin yung mga kakulangan na kailangan maibigay sa mga evacuees.
Meron din pong apila nila na mayroong 16,000 na mga estudyante na hindi pa naka-enroll sapagkat wala silang gamit, wala silang mga damit dahil yung mga damit nila at saka mga gamit nila noon ay nasira sa Marawi. Baka po pwede natin sila bigyan ng gamit pang eskwelahan.
Madam Speaker, Mr. President, yes, we will look into that, Mr. Congressman. We know the problem. I think the DPW, DepEd also know that. We will communicate with them para matugunan natin yung mga pangangailangan nila.
Sa ngayon po, ilang percent po na nandyan pa si Hapilon sa Marawi? Kasi may mga rumors na nakatakas na.
As far as we are concerned, he is still inside kasi yung mga rumor, marami ng rumor na lumalabas noong pang mga about 3 weeks ago na nakaalis na siya. Hanggang ngayon, iba-iba yung lumalabas na rumor. So, without confirmation, we believe that he is still inside.
So sana po ma-approve itong extension at kami ay umaasa na hindi makakalabas ng buhay si Hapilon sa Marawi sapagkat kung titingnan ho natin, malaki ang nasira na damage dahil sa presence ni Hapilon. Maraming salamat po, Madam Speaker. Maraming salamat po.
Madam Speaker, Mr. President, may I bring in Secretary Alonto who is from Marawi. He will say something. Very short lang po.
Yes, the gentleman is recognized.
Mr. President, Madam Speaker, what propelled me to talk, today and ask for a little bit of time, is that to remind this House that the nation is listening. Several text messages that I received as someone alluded to the barbarities and violations of human rights done by some of our military men. But this message is asking me, why can we not ask, what about the barbarity and the violations of human rights perpetrated by this ISIS gunmen? When in fact one captive was able to escape, and in front of him, when he was with his ISIS, his own daughter was raped. Mr. President, Madam Chair, I've been listening, and we are talking about local terrorists here. We are talking about extension of martial law, and the suspension of the right of habeas corpus. I remind this House, and I stand on my integrity as the founding leader of the MNLF, that even Corridor Miswar, you are not confronted, this nation is not confronted with a local terrorist alone. Mr. President, Madam Speaker, what is happening in Mindanao, particularly in Malawi, is not a simple case of disorder. No, sir. It is an invasion. It is a rebellion, a continuing rebellion. It exists. All the ingredients for martial law is there. Invasion, though gradually, because there is the participation of foreign terrorists who are members of the so-called Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. In fact, the day that we landed in Davao, and the President instructed us within 24 hours I was in Marawi, in the next couple of days, we were able to establish that out of the casualties, 8 were foreign terrorists. This is an invasion. So any doubting Thomas here would say that it does not explain. We have to, because we are confronted with a problem that is not a local problem alone. It is an international problem. What happened for the last couple of months and for the last couple of years, we were watching Syria, Aleppo, Mosul. Now in 24 hours we have. On this, Mr. President, we are asking an extension of martial law.
for whatever duration involves both risk and opportunity, and we can manage both. Mr. President, let me speak about the morale of our men in uniform, our soldiers and policemen. It is reported to us that it is still high. For how long is an imponderable. I speak to the issue of morale because this is the driving force that will allow our troops to fight and win, not only in a body count war, but in the hearts and minds of the people they serve. We have talked about what we have. I would like to touch briefly on who is the enemy. Mr. President, the enemy is also reflected in this new dimension of warfare that we continue to develop in our doctrines. It does not recognize front lines or boundaries. You have a group of young men with limited education, influenced by religious leaders, who are not only willing to die, but who want to die. Mr. President, finally, our people, their local governments and agencies, and soldiers wait for a decision and sustained direction so that we can attend to the painful task of rehabilitation, reconstruction, and recovery. Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader,
Mr. Speaker,
Majority Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, the Minority Leader wishes to be recognized before...
The Senate Minority Leader is recognized, Senator Drilon.
Mr. President, will the gentleman, Senator Honasan, sponsor of the motion, or the movement, yield to one or two questions?
With pleasure, Mr. President, especially from the distinguished former Senate President, now Minority Floor Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. First, we just have to reiterate on record that martial law, or any extension thereof, under decided cases, must be based on actual invasion or rebellion. As we earlier stated, the preview standard of imminent danger is both on the need, on the length of time or the duration, and the coverage. Moreover, Mr. President, I think we can all agree that the reason why martial law was limited to 60 days on its initial proclamation is in order that the decision of the President can be subjected to regular review. And that is why the Supreme Court is given the authority to look into the factual basis of martial law. And in the case of Congress, on the extension, it is Congress who determines, not the President, it is Congress who determines the duration of the extension. The Constitution is very clear on that. It is Congress who determines what the extension will be. Given all of these principles, would the gentleman agree that it is consistent with this principle that we should not be remiss in our duty to, one, check regularly on the exercise of this extraordinary power, and second, this can be done only where we have a limited period for declaring martial law and so that we will have an opportunity to call again on the executive branch to justify any extension in the future. Would the gentleman agree with that, Mr. President?
Mr. President, in principle, I would agree with formulating, if it is not yet in our present laws, a system for checks and balances. But again, I limit myself, with all due respect to my own personal experience on the ground. We operate under a very porous social, economic, and political environment. And if this were not enough, we are burdened by the absence of a consolidated mechanism for timely, accurate, and complete information that will allow not only Congress, but our decision makers to make rational, informed, intelligent, long-term policy decisions. But of course, Mr. President, having said that, I have already decided in my mind after hearing the best available information, and I will vote accordingly. But let me add also, Mr. President, that it is the President with his constitutional prerogatives who has requested for this. And it is, I think, the mandate of Congress to make sure that these powers are not abused. So it is in this context that I submit not to our individual inclinations, but to the collective and consensual wisdom of both chambers.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, there is no dispute that indeed the President has requested for the extension. However, I don't think it is a disrespect to the Chief Executive if we exercise that prerogative to fix the period other than what the President has indicated. And in fact, Mr. President, if you look at the media reports in the past 4 weeks or 5 weeks, for example, the media is replete with statements on the part of the Defense Secretary, of the President, that the conflict in Malawi may be finished shorter than the requested December 31, 2017 timeframe suggested by the President in his letter. On June 27, the good Secretary of National Defense said, quote, the month-long conflict in Malawi may be finished in a week or two. On July 4, 2017, the Department of National Defense was reported to have said government troops took control of a Maoti terrorist group stronghold in Malawi City battle zone. The Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces, General Anyo, said that the Maoti has been reduced to holding an area of only 1 or 2 square kilometers, about the size of 2 to 3 intramuros walled city, consisting of about 4 barangays. The President also was quoted as having said that he needs 10 to 15 days more to solve the Malawi crisis. And to quote him, he said, I think in 10 to 15 days, it's already be okay. This was on July 11. And therefore, all of these statements, Mr. President, confirms the fact that indeed December 31 is too long a period, and that will not allow us to check on the need to further check whether or not the circumstances of actual rebellion continue to exist between now and December 31. In fact, some of our colleagues were quoted as saying this week that the President told them that 60 days extension of martial law is okay. And this happened, I understand, in a dinner which some of the legislators had with the President. Under all of these circumstances, Mr. President, it is our respectful submission that we should not abdicate upon our authority to regularly check on the executive whether or not there is a need for further extension of martial law after the period that we will be prepared to grant to the President. And my submission, Mr. President, with all due respect, is that martial law extension under these circumstances should not exceed 60 days. And therefore, I would ask our good gentleman sponsor, Movan, whether or not he would accept this amendment of limiting the extension to 60 days.
Mr. President, before I respond directly to your question, please allow me to share this not only with the Chamber but with the good gentleman. We have called the security sector to task for what we admit are conflicting statements. In fact, we have been very, very straightforward. We have asked them to make sure that this is inculcated in the designated spokespersons. To my mind, Mr. President, the job of soldiers or policemen is not to explain policy, but to implement policy. We must allow the civilian political leadership to do the explaining. This has generated, admittedly, some conflict. And to add to the confusion, we have media reports. I am not implying anything about the freedom of the press. That is based on incomplete, inaccurate information that subjects a developing situation to unwarranted and premature trial by publicity. Now, let me add to that. You were present, Mr. President, during the under the radar first meeting of the Intelligence Oversight Committee.
I'm sorry?
The first meeting of the Intelligence Oversight Committee, which we tried to keep.
No, I was not present, Mr. President, for the record.
Well, I stand corrected. But we proceeded with that meeting using an observation of the good gentleman that we must assume that such meetings should be conducted in executive session. Precisely, we have asked not only for purposes of accounting and auditing, the special accounting and auditing procedures for intelligence funds, for the intelligence community, to augment the efforts of our men on the ground in terms of operation by making sure that the old habits of keeping information to themselves would be discarded already. Now, having said that, I have no problem with these proposed amendments at the proper time. But as it is, my task is to present as straightforward as possible a decision to the Chamber on whether, as it is written, we will allow the extension of martial law up to 31 December 2017. I will limit myself to that.
Mr. President, well, the gentleman has said very clearly that he has no problem with the proposed period of 60 days. Under these circumstances, at the appropriate time, I believe it is now appropriate that I propose an amendment to the motion that the extension of the martial law will be up to 60 days from today. That is the motion that I am presenting, that is the amendment I am presenting, Mr. President, to the motion of the good gentleman movement. As he said, he has no problem with the extension, it's just at the appropriate time. And that is why I believe that the appropriate time is now for this representation to present the proposed amendment for the consideration of the sponsor.
Well, Mr. President, I do not want to burden the issue. But since I said early on that I have already a position on the matter, I will be contradicting myself if I subordinate the collective wisdom and judgment of the Chamber, the majority, to even a proposed amendment like that. So with all due respect, I would defer that decision until the proper time when the Chamber can resolve it procedurally.
may I know from the gentleman, Mr. President, when is the appropriate time that an amendment to the motion can be presented? Just for our information, Mr. President. Because my interpretation is that now is the appropriate time, but I may be wrong.
Majority Leader. Mr.
Mr.
President, I will subordinate myself to my chain of command, the Majority Floor Leader.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President, with the permission of the two gentlemen, thank you. The appropriate time, Mr. President, perhaps, is when and if we defeat the motion. Because the motion is to approve the proposal of the President to extend it to 150 days. Now, if the body decides later to vote against the 150 days request, then the proper time to propose another day, a time frame would be the proper time. Because the motion is very clear, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I think the proper, with all due respect to the learned Majority Leader, we have proposed an amendment. If the gentleman movant, Senator Honasan, will not accept this amendment, so that's it. But I believe we are, it is not correct for us to vote first on the requested 150 days. If Senator Honasan will accept the amendment and there is no objection, then we vote on the motion as amended by this representation. But if not, then we may have to, if necessary or if proper, we may have to present it to a vote by the body. So our position, Mr. President, is that we inquire from the movant whether or not he accepts our amendment.
Mr. President, we have known each other for a long time.
Very long time, Mr. President.
Too long, in fact. It always, as the Majority Floor Leader eloquently said, it always pains me to disagree with the better wisdom of it. So, I do not accept, Mr. President.
All right. That's no, I have no problems with the gentleman not accepting. That's part of our parliamentary debate here. Now, since the gentleman has accepted, has objected, has not accepted our amendment, we move that we divide the House as to whether the amendment should be approved before we vote on the entire motion of the gentleman sponsor move of the motion. We submit, Mr. President.
Majority Leader. Mr. President, following the suggestion of the Senate Minority Floor Leader, I move that we divide the House on this issue.
The House of the Senate, Mr. President,
Yes, that's
is
correct.
what we mean. So to
That's correct.
facilitate, perhaps a raising of hands will be sufficient.
Yes. The motion to amend the motion has been rejected by the proponent, so we will divide the House of the Senate. When you raise your hand, you are in favor of the Drilon amendment. Okay, so those in favor of the Drilon amendment, which shortens the extension period, please raise your hand. Those in favor of the Drilon. Result. Okay. What's the result?
I call
Which he explained the Habeas Corpus Mindanao until 31. We
Constitution and the rules of the special joint session that we have approved earlier, may I move that the Secretary of the Senate be directed to call the roll of senators for nominal voting.
Majority Leader, can we defer action by the Senate so that the House can be on the same page as the Senate.
I withdraw the motion,
Yes.
Mr. President.
Motion is withdrawn.
The Honorable House Majority Leader is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, we have heard our resource persons describe the harrowing experiences of our troops, how well entrenched the Maute and other rebel groups are in Mindanao. We have seen the effects of this war on our brother Maranaos and fellow Filipinos in Malawi, a city destroyed, a people displaced, and economically devastated. The threat that surfaced devastatingly in Malawi City, as we now know, is not confined within this city. The Executive Secretary, Defense Secretary, National Security Advisor, and the AFP Chief of Staff, among others, all gave testimonies that our country still faces a serious crisis of security in Mindanao, and that there is compelling reason to give our security personnel all the help they can get to end this crisis. Mr. Speaker, may I inform this joint session that we received a resolution issued by the League of Provinces of the Philippines, headed by President Ryan Singson and Chairman Al Francis Bichara, and signed by 68 other provincial governors all over the country, supporting President Rodrigo Roa Duterte's declaration of martial law in the whole of Mindanao and the extension of the same. Similarly, the National Board of the Provincial Board Members League of the Philippines, headed by its President Ria Cristina Fariñas of the province of Ilocos Norte, and Chairman Ryan Enriquez of the province of Cavite, adopted a resolution supporting the extension of martial law in the whole of Mindanao. The Supreme Court has ruled on the sufficiency of the factual basis of the proclamation of the President of martial law in the whole province of Mindanao. And upon initiative of the President, he now calls on the Congress to extend the validity of Presidential Proclamation 216 to December 31, 2017, because the rebellion still persists and that public safety requires it. On this note, Mr. Speaker, I move that the Congress extend Proclamation number 216, series of 2017, declaring martial law and suspending the privilege of the writ of Habeas Corpus in the whole of Mindanao up to December 31, 2017.
Objection, Mr. Speaker.
Yes,
Mr. Speaker.
we recognize the Minority Leader.
No.
Tino.
Yes. Representative Tino
Thank
is
you.
recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I object, and I would like to be given time to explain my objection.
I move that the
Majority
gentleman
Leader.
be given 3 minutes, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, nag-o-object po ako, tumututol sa resolution na aprubahan ang extension ng martial law sa buong Mindanao hanggang sa December 31, 2017. Ito po ang ilang argumento na nais kong ipaliwanag. Una, wala pong batayan na ipinaliwanag ang mga resource persons ng Malacanang para sa extension ng martial law. Binanggit po kanina ng sponsor at kagalang-galang na majority leader na may Supreme Court decision na nag-uphold sa deklarasyon ng martial law. Pero nais ko lang po ilinaw na ang decision na yon ay nag-a-apply sa original na deklarasyon at iba na po ang sitwasyon ngayong pinag-uusapan na natin ng extension. So dalawa po ang requirement ng konstitusyon. Una, existence ng aktual na rebellion. No? At ang sinasabi ng mga resource person natin ay 80 na lamang ang mga rebelde sa Malawi. Confined sila sa 1 or 2 square kilometers sa 3 barangay sa Marawi City. Pangalawa, requirement ng konstitusyon, kailangan may banta sa public safety. No? At malinaw na malinaw po na sa 99.9% ng Mindanao ay umiiral ng buo at walang kahati ang kapangyarihan ng gobyernong sibilyan, ng civilian government, mula sa national level hanggang sa local government level. No? At kailangan pong panindigan ng Kongresong ito ang batayang prinsipyo ng konstitusyon ng civilian supremacy at all times. No? At malinaw po na nandyan po ang gobyerno sa, sabi ko nga kanina, 99.9% ng Mindanao. No? Kaya po, dahil nandyan po ang pambansang gobyerno, ay matitiyak po ang proteksyon ng kaligtasan ng publiko. Hindi po sapat ang batayan na inilatag. Pangalawa at huling argumento ay ang humanitarian crisis na dulot ng 60 araw ng martial law. Binanggit na po natin kanina, sa kabila ng sinasabi paulit-ulit ng mga resource persons na wala raw pong human rights violations sa ilalim ng martial law. Binanggit po natin kanina na meron pong mahigit 250,000 mga kababayan natin na karamihan ay mga Moro na napilitang lumikas dahil sa martial law at sa mga bomba na pinauulan ng AFP, no, sa ngalan ng martial law. No? Kung ang mga report na nakakarating po sa atin, kaya po lumobo ng mahigit 250,000 ang mga lumikas mula sa Marawi at karatig na bayan ay mas dahil pa po sa aerial bombardment na nagaganap. No? Bilang pangwakas po, ang nais ko pong idiin dito, aral na po ng kasaysayan na hindi military ang solusyon sa mga problemang pangkasaysayan at panlipunan na bumabagabag sa Mindanao at sa buong Pilipinas. Ang kailangan po ng mga kababayan natin, trabaho, serbisyo, hustisya sa Mindanao, hindi martial law. Kaya kailangan bumoto po tayo ng no sa panukala ng kagalang-galang na sponsor. Maraming salamat, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to our rules, considering that there is a pending motion of the Senate
Mr.
to
Speaker,
vote.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Majority Leader.
so that we could join the issues, I have also an objection, and I would like to be given time to explain my objection.
Well, Mr. Speaker, one member spoke in favor of the resolution and another spoke against. We cannot allow anyone who objects to be given time to explain. Otherwise, we will lose track of our deliberations. So I believe Section 54, it says here, where a motion to close the debate, because we already filed a motion, one speech in favor and one against will be allowed to speak.
Mr. Speaker, we have approved the rules of procedure for this joint special session. And that supposed rule under the House is not part of the approved rules of this special joint session. That's why I'm raising, so that we could join the issues, that together with the objections earlier interposed, I have also objections, so that the objections can be collated and can be assessed for purposes of voting.
Mr. Speaker, with due respect to my esteemed colleague, under the rules of these proceedings, no member can rise without approaching Section 9.
Then I will approach you.
May I be finished? Section 9 states that a member of the Senate or the House of Representatives who wishes to speak shall rise and approach the majority leader of the Senate or the House of Representatives as the case.
I'm not approaching you.
In Ilocano, Manong, you're approaching me. In the spirit of liberality, Mr. President and Mr. Speaker, only for this last opposition to the motion, I move that the gentleman be granted the same period of 3 minutes to express or support his objection.
Mr. Speaker,
Gentleman is given 3 minutes.
Thank you, Majority Leader. I object for 3 overriding reasons. 1, there is no sufficient factual basis for the extension of martial law, in the same manner that there was no sufficient factual anchorage for the original declaration of martial law. There has been reference to the Supreme Court decision in Lagman versus the Honorable Executive Secretary, but that decision is not yet final. The petitioners have filed a seizable motion for reconsideration. What the subalterns of the President have shown to us is some sort of a basis, but the Constitution calls for sufficiency of factual basis. For example, there is no actual rebellion in Malawi City. We concede that there is lawless violence amounting to terrorism, but terrorism is not a ground for the declaration of martial law or its extension. The current escalating number of deaths of both combatants and civilians, massive destruction of public and private properties, and the widespread displacement of residents, which would amount to a humanitarian crisis, are all the aftermath of the imposition of martial law. And they would be further aggravated with the extension of martial law. Second, the coverage of martial law cannot be extrapolated to the whole of Mindanao, where there is no actual rebellion, as admitted no less by the martial law administrator, Defense Secretary Lorenzana. The alleged threat or danger of the so-called rebellion in Malawi is spilling over the rest of Mindanao is just a threat or danger. And according to the Constitution, the threat of rebellion, the imminent threat of rebellion, is not anymore a ground for the declaration of martial law or its extension. And the third reason, Your Honor, is that the safeguard of the Constitution on the duration of martial law is to impose a limited period. Limited period. Consequently, the original declaration of martial law should not go beyond 60 days. It stands to reason, Mr. Speaker, that no extension should extend for more than the original period of 60 days. Thank
May I
you,
remind,
Mr. Speaker.
Yes, okay, thank you. Mr. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, our parliamentary status now is we already have the Honorable Majority Leader of the Senate making his motion, duly seconded after the amendment was rejected. On the part of the House, we already have made our motion. There is an objection. So I move that we now recognize the Majority Leader of the Senate for the Senate to conduct its voting.
The Senate Majority Leader is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker. I now move that the Secretary of the Senate be directed to call the roll of senators for nominal voting on the motion to extend the proclamation of martial law and the suspension of the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus. So moved, Mr. President.
So the Secretary of the Senate shall call the roll of senators for nominal voting. A vote of yes is in favor of the request of the President to extend martial law up to December 31, 2017. Okay. So Secretary, please go ahead.
Roll call vote. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, De Lima, Drilon, Ejercito, Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Honasan, Hontiveros, Lacson, Ligarda, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Po, Recto, Soto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Soviri, the Senate President.
I vote yes. I will just announce the results of the voting in the Senate. On the part of the Senate, 16 senators voted in the affirmative, 4 negative. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I now move that the House of Representatives conducts nominal voting on the motion to extend the period of the proclamation of martial law and the suspension of the privilege of the writ of Habeas Corpus, and that the Secretary General be directed to conduct the nominal voting.
The Secretary General of the House of Representatives shall call the roll of members of Congress for nominal voting. Those in favor of the motion of the Majority Leader shall say yes.
Roll call of members for consideration of the motion to extend Proclamation number 216. Honorable Representatives Abad, Abaya, Abayon, Abellanosa, Abu, Abueg, Asharon, Akop, Acosta, Acosta Alba, Adiong, Adbincula, Agaraw, Agabaw, Aglipay Bilyar, Albano, Alcala, Alejano, Almario, Almonte, Alonte, Alvarez Franz, Alvarez Mercedes, Amante, Amatong, Andaya, Angara Castillo, Antonino, Antonio, Aragones, Arbison, Arcillas, Arenas, Atienza.
We vote no, and we would like to explain our vote so that for record purposes, our position at Buhay Party List is very clear.
After the voting.
Thank you.
Aumentado, Bagao, Bagatsing, Bagilat, Banal, Barbers, Barsaga, Batawil, Batocabe, Bautista Bandigan, Belaro, Belmonte Feliciano, Belmonte Jose Christopher, Belmonte Ricardo, Benitez, Vernos,
Bertiz, Biazon, Billones, Biron, Bolilla, Bondok, Bordado, Bravo Anthony, yes, Bravo Maria Vida, Brosas.
Ang representasyong ito po ay bumoboto ng no at nais ko pong makapagpaliwanag mamaya, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. Bulot Begtang, Kagas,
My vote is yes, but I would just like to receive my right to explain my vote letter. Thank you.
Calderon, Calixto Rubiano, Caminero, Campos, Canama, Cari, Casilaw,
My vote is no, and I would like to explain my vote later.
Castelo, Castro Franz,
Ang representasyong ito po ay bumoboto ng no at mag-explain po ako ng aking dahilan later.
Castro Predinil, Catamco, Cayetano, Celeste, Serapica, Ceriles, Chavez, Chipeco, Coanco, Cortés, Cortuna, Cosalan, Cristologo.
Mr. Speaker, my vote is yes, but I'd like to reserve for an explanation later on. Thank you.
Cua, Collantes, Cua, Quaresma, Cueva, Dalipe, Daza, De Jesus,
I vote no. At mamaya po ipapaliwanag ko ang paninindigan ko.
De Venecia, De Vera, Defensor, Del Mar,
I vote yes, Mr. Speaker, but reserve the right to explain my vote later.
Del Rosario, Del Oso, Montalia, Dimaporo Abdullah, Dimaporo Muhammad Khalid, Duabit, Durano, Elago.
This representation votes no, and I reserve my right to explain my vote later.
Enberga, Erice, Erigel, Ermita Buhain, Escudero, Espina, Espino, Estrella, Eusebio, Ebardoni, Fariñas, Fernando, Ferrer Juliet, Ferrer Luis John, Ferriol, Florendo, Flores, Fortuno, Fuentebella, Garbin, Garcia Gwendolyn, Garcia Jose Enrique III, Garcia Albano, Garin Oscar, Garin Sharon, Gasataya, Gatchalian, Heron, Go Ana Cristina, Go Mark,
Gomez, Gonzaga, Gonzales Alexandria, Gonzales Aurelio Dong, Gonzales Fernando, Goriseta, Gulyas, Hernandez, Herrera D, Hopper, Alosjos, Javier, Ho, Konghun, Labad-Labad, Lacson, Lagman.
Mr. Speaker, my vote is no. I will submit my explanation later.
Lanete, Laugan, Lazatin, Leachon, Lee, Lim Kai Chong, Lobregat, Lopez Benhar, Lopez Carlo, Lopez Manuel Luis, Loyola, Macapagal Arroyo, Maceda, Madrona, Malapitan, Manalo, Mangawang, Mangudadato Suharto, Mangudadato Zahid, Marcoleta, Marcos, Marino, Marquez, Martinez, Matugas, Meliana, Mending, Mendoza, Mercado, Mirasol, Montoro, Nava, Noel, Nograles Jericho, Nograles Carlo, Nolasco, Nunez Malañaon, Huaminal, Nieto, Huaminal Ocampo, Olivares, Ong Edwin, Ong Henry, Ortega Pablo, Ortega Bininola, Pacquiao, Paduano, Palma, Pancho, Panganiban, Panotes, Papandayan, Pichay, Pimentel, Pineda, Plaza, Primicia Sagabas, Kimbo, Radasa, Ramirez Sato, Ramos, Relampagos, Revilla, Rowapuno, Robes, Rocamora.
Mr. Speaker, my vote is yes, but I would like to explain my vote later.
Rodriguez Isidro, Rodriguez Maximo, Roman, Romero, Romualdez, Romualdo, Roque Hari, Roque Rogelio, Sakdalan, Sagarbaria, Sahali, Salceda, Salimbangon, Salo, Salon, Sambar, Sandoval, Santos Recto, Sarmiento Cesar, Sarmiento Edgar Mary, Sevillano, Sema, Siao,
My vote is yes. My vote is yes, but I would like to explain my stand later.
Silverio, Singson, Swansing Estrelita, Swansing Horacio, Suarez, C. Alvarado,
Mr. Speaker, I vote yes, pero gusto ko pong maipaliwanag ang aking boto mamaya.
Tambunting, Tan Angelina, Tan Milagrosa, Tan Sherny,
Mr. Speaker, Kusog Tausug Party List votes yes, and Kusog Tausug Party List suggests that this August body extend martial law not just in Mindanao, but all throughout the entire country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Tejada, Teves, Tiangco, Ting, Tinio,
Mr. Speaker, I vote no to martial law extension and will explain my vote later.
Tolentino, Treñas, Tugna,
Mr. Speaker, this representation votes yes, but reserves my right to explain my vote later.
Tupas, Turabin Hataman, T, Umali, Unabia, Ungab, Unico, Uy Juliet, Uy Rolando, Uy Barreta, Vargas, Vargas Alfonso, Velarde,
Mr. Speaker, this representation votes yes and reserves the right to explain my vote later or submit my explanation, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Velasco, Velasco Catera, Veloso, Vergara, Villafuerte, Villanueva, Villarraza Suarez, Villarica, Villarin,
Mr. Speaker, Akbayan votes no and reserves our right to explain my vote later.
Biolago, Yap Arthur, Yap Melesio, Yap Victor, Yu, Zamora Maria Carmen, Zamora Ronaldo, Sarate,
Mr. Speaker, bilang kinatawa ng bayan muna, no po ang aking boto at ako po ay magpapaliwanag mamaya.
Subiri. Speaker votes.
I vote yes. On the part of the House of Representatives, 245 members voted in the affirmative, 14 negative. Zero abstention. The result of the joint voting of the members of the Congress on the motion show that 261 voted in the affirmative and 18 negative. Pursuant to the Constitution and the rules of the joint session, the motion to extend the proclamation of martial law and the suspension of the privilege of the writ of Habeas Corpus is hereby approved by the Congress.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, on the part of the Senate, I move that we instruct the Secretariat to draft the resolution of both houses and to authorize the Senate President and the Speaker of the House of Representatives to review and approve the resolution of both houses, and that such approval shall be valid and effective for all purposes, as if the resolution of both houses were already approved directly by both houses of Congress in joint session.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, on the part of the House of Representatives, I move that we instruct the Secretary General to draft the resolution of both houses, to authorize the Senate President and the Speaker of the House of Representatives to review and approve the resolution of both houses, and that such approval shall be valid and effective for all purposes, as if the resolution of both houses was approved directly by both houses of Congress.
Is there any objection? The chair hears none. On the part of the House of Representatives, the motion is approved.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. As approved earlier, we now allow the members of on the part of the members of Congress to explain their votes. On the part of the Senate, may I now ask that Senator Manny Pacquiao be recognized to explain his vote. Thereafter, 10 other members of the Senate.
Senator Pacquiao has 1 minute pursuant to our rules to explain his vote, unless a senator has given you his or her time. But you have to name the senator who gave you his or her time.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator
President.
Pacquiao is recognized.
Mr. President, I vote yes to support the declaration of martial law in the whole Mindanao, enables us that I think it's the right time to give to support the government to exercise their authority and power to discipline people, Mr. President. And also, Mr. President, in the Bible, Mr. President, it says, let everyone subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authorities except that which God has established. The authorities that exist has been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted. And those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Pacquiao. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Recto, this representation, JB Ejercito, Senator Lacson, Villar, Honasan, and Legarda will submit their explanation of their votes. At this point, may we now
Together with me.
recognize...
Make it of record. I will also submit my written explanation.
And the Senate President. Now, may we recognize Senator Grace Poe to explain her vote.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, Senator Poe and Senator Villanueva will just submit their explanation of their votes, Mr. President. May we ask the Minority Leader if... may we now ask the Minority Leader be recognized, Mr. President.
We will request for silence, please. Let us listen to the manifestation of the Senate Minority Leader, who is now recognized.
Mr. President, can we have some order in the hall first?
May we request the members of the House to please keep silence?
Mr. President, I voted no to the extension of martial law in the whole of Mindanao, an extension which will last until December 31, 2017. Mr. President, if this Congress, as it did, gives its full and unqualified assent for the continued martial law in the entire Mindanao, where there is no evidence of actual rebellion outside of Malawi City, then we might just be reduced into a mere echo chamber. We would have then abdicated our duty under the Constitution to allow the extension of martial law only in cases of where actual rebellion persists and where public safety requires it. If we shirk from our role as supreme policy-making body and allow, without any basis, the extension of martial law and its coverage of the entire Mindanao, tomorrow, Mr. President, we may wake up with martial law being declared in the entire country under the justification of an existing rebellion in Malawi City and the threat, however remote, of rebellious activities spilling over other parts of the country. The factual basis, Mr. President, for a continued martial law in the entire Mindanao and its extension up to December 31, 2017 do not meet the requirements of the Constitution. The mandate of the Constitution is clear. Martial law will be declared only if actual rebellion exists, and Congress may extend the declaration if that rebellion persists. Congress is given the plenary power to decide on the period of the extension based on such determination. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, no evidence was presented to establish the necessity of placing the entire Mindanao under martial law. The President's request for extension mentioned only 10 out of 27 provinces in Mindanao. Martial law should be limited to those places where actual rebellion continues to exist. Moreover, contrary to all the public statements made by the security sector and by the President himself, that significant progress has been made against the rebels in a span of 2 months, why is an extension be up to December 31, 2017 being requested? Mr. President, we are one with the Filipino people in supporting the military's efforts to neutralize the Bauti extremists in the shortest possible time. With the facts presented to us, however, we are confident that our military will be successful in resolving the crisis within a period of time shorter than the end of the year. We also remain faithful to the Constitution in recommending that the extension be limited only to the areas directly affected in Mindanao. Mr. President, history will judge us whether we fulfilled our mandate under the Constitution and acted in the interest of the people we represent. Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Mr.
sir.
President.
Thank you very much. Majority Leader.
Senator Pangilinan, Mr. President.
Senator Pangilinan is recognized. Please be conscious of the time limit.
Maraming salamat, Ginoong Tagapangulo. Tumutol tayo sa 5 buwang pagpapatupad ng martial law sa buong Mindanao. Naniniwala tayo na ang saligang batas mismo ang nagsasabing hindi maaring lumampas sa 60 araw ang martial law declaration. Ito po, 150 days, halos kalahating taon po. Naniniwala po tayo na hindi ito ang layunin ng ating saligang batas. Naniniwala din po tayo na sa usapin ng kabuuan ng Mindanao, base na rin sa ebidensya, sa dokumento at datos na isinumite ng ating gobyerno, 4 na barangay na lamang ang sinasalakay sa kasalukuyan at 16 na barangay ang nailaya na mula sa mga terorista mula nung nadeklara ang martial law. 4 na barangay sa loob ng 150 araw. 4 barangays for 150 days when we were able to save and rescue and defeat the terrorists in 16 barangays in 60 days. Therefore, we also believe precisely that as to the factual basis, medyo kulang ang basihan para magkaroon ng ganitong klaseng lawak ng martial law. Naniniwala rin tayo sa posisyon ng 3 SC Justices nung sila po ay nag-dissent dito po sa ruling ng Lagman case sa Declaration of Martial Law. Sina Chief Justice Sereno, Justice Carpio, at Justice Kagiwa, sila pong 3 ay naniniwala na hindi basehan ang deklarasyon, walang basehan para sa buong Mindanao. Kung hindi, bagkus, doon lamang kung saan merong aktwal na pag-aaklas o rebellion. Ang mas matinding agam-agam po natin ay ang posibilidad na magkaroon ng deklarasyon ng martial law sa darating na mga araw sa Visayas o di kaya sa Luzon. Bagamat naniniwala tayo sa pahayag ng ating kalihim ng National Defense na si Secretary Lorenzana na habang nagkaroon ng kilos ng terorista sa Bohol, wala naman po silang plano na
Can the gentleman wind up, please?
mag-implement ng martial law sa Visayas. At naniniwala din tayo na bagamat sinama ang NPA ng AFP sa kanilang operational directive sa mga grupong kinakailangang harapin, at ang NPA ay kumukilos sa buong bansa, sinabi rin ng gobyerno wala silang planong magdeklara ng martial law sa Metro Manila at buong Luzon. Ngunit, and we will wind up, Mr. President, hindi pa rin panatag ang loob natin na kung sakali sa darating na mga araw na magkaroon ng isolated acts of terrorism either in the Visayas or in Luzon, will this be the basis to declare martial law in Luzon, in Visayas, or nationwide? This we have to guard against, Mr. President, and this is precisely why our concern is the basis for the declaration, we believe, is unconstitutional and thus is a matter that has to be addressed in the coming days.
Thank you, Senator Pangilinan.
Thank you.
Majority Leader.
Senator Aquino, Mr. President.
Senator Aquino is recognized.
Mr. President, maraming salamat. Humindi po ako sa extension ng 150 days dahil sa tingin ko po ang nararapat na extension ay 60 days lamang. 3 tanong po ang naging paggabay sa akin upang makaabot sa desisyong ito. Unang-una, makakaantala ba ang paglimita sa 60 days sa operations ng AFP at sa ating mga sundalo? Clearly, Mr. President, hindi naman po ito makakaantala sa kanila. At buo naman po ang suporta natin sa AFP from the beginning. Hindi lang po sa moral, hindi lang po sa budget, kung hindi pati rin po sa mga batas na kailangan amendyahan para matulungan po sila. Pangalawang tanong, ano ang nais ng 500,000 na internally displaced Filipinos na nasa ibang syudad at sa mga evacuation centers? Sa akin pong pagkakaalam, gusto po na nilang bumalik sa kanilang mga bahay. At tingin ko po, ang rehabilitation ay mas mainam na gawin sa ilalim ng civilian authority at hindi po sa ilalim ng martial law. Pangatlo, at siguro po pinakamahalaga, sa ating desisyon ngayong hapong ito. Ang 60-day limitation ba ay makakatulong sa pagdaguyod ng demokrasya sa ating bansa? Ang 60-day limitation ba ay makakatulong sa pagtaguyod ng demokrasya sa ating bansa? Yung sagot ko po dyan, oo. Unang-una, tinataguyod po ang nararapat na check and balance ng co-equal branches of government na executive and legislative branch. Pangalawa, Congress will be able to fulfill its mandate and responsibility given to it in the Constitution in shorter intervals. Mr. President, the presence of martial law in our country today puts our democracy in an unusual and unstable situation. Ngayon po na meron tayong martial law, hindi po ganong katibay ang kinatatayuan ng ating demokrasya. Kaya po, yung pagpapasyang kailangan gawin po natin, tayo ba ay magpapalakas sa ating demokrasya o tayo po ba ay gagawa ng mga desisyon na posibleng makapaghina dito? Siyempre po, boboto tayo sa pagpapalakas at pagpapatibay ng ating demokrasya dahil mahirap na pong masanay. Maraming salamat, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Aquino. Majority Leader.
Senator Ontiveros, Mr. President.
Senator Ontiveros is recognized.
Salamat po, Mr. President. Mr. Senate President, I voted no to extend the declaration of martial law in Mindanao. The AFP has been quite clear in demonstrating the threat of terrorism in Malawi. The threat is clear and the need for urgent response compelling. But one thing remained unanswered until now. Exactly how martial law contributes to meeting this threat. Walang maisagot dito ang ating mga security advisors na ang tanging nasabi ay kailangan ng enhanced security-based operations. And it's absurd for us to use timelines and needs on the ground as a reason for martial law. Lahat yan kayang sagutin ng calling out powers ng Pangulo. And in any event, martial law does not suspend the Bill of Rights or allow the state to run roughshod over civil liberties. Ang tangi lamang maidadagdag sana ng deklarasyon ng martial law sa Mindanao ay ipailalim sa kontrol ng militar ang mga lokal na pamamahala na nadiskaril dahil sa terorismo. But there are no local government units in Mindanao that have stopped working or have collapsed because of terrorism. Even the local government in Malawi, despite the enormous challenges it faces, is functioning under civil rule. The LGU in Camiguin functions the same as the LGU in Metro Manila. I fear that this extension of the martial law in Mindanao will pave the way for a Philippines-wide martial law. Buo ang tiwala ko, Mr. President, sa kakayahan ng ating magigiting na sundalo at pulis, tulad ng sundalong si First Lieutenant Ken Fagian. Kaya nilang supuin ang terorismo sa Malawi, gabay ang kasalukuyang kapangyarihan ng ehekutibo na imobilisa ang buong hanay ng sandatahang lakas. Hindi martial law ang tumatalo sa mga teroristang maute, kundi ang tapang, galing at determinasyon ng ating mga sundalo at pulis. Let's not rob our heroic soldiers and police of the glory they deserve by attributing our recent victories against terrorism to martial law. Martial law is also not supposed to be the morale booster for our troops, but rather the support and gratitude of our people. It's not a quick fix. Martial law is not a mere political tool. It's not supposed to be anything on steroids. It reverses a very important constitutional principle. I'm down to my last minute, Mr. President, that civilian authority must always be superior to military authority. Not the calling out power, not the declaration of a state of emergency, nor the Human Security Act can reverse this principle. Martial law lang. And because it reverses this principle, it must be exercised only in the most exigent of circumstances as a last resort and by a government that would wield it judiciously. Yes, we must be warned, and we must warn the people. Remember, o Plan Sagittarius. To my fellow legislators, history will judge what we decided in this hall today. I'd like to remind us all that we were here to be the voice of democracy, not the president's echoes. We're here to protect democracy, not the despotic whims of one man. I'd like to remind everyone of Marcos's martial law in 1972 when Congress abdicated its responsibility. We are chambers of lawmakers, not the President's echo chamber. And so, Mr. President, because I haven't seen any evidence that martial law offers any distinct strategic advantage to our soldiers and police in their fight against the Maute terrorists that other laws cannot offer, because I cannot trust a government that has played God with the lives of 8,000 to 12,000 Filipinos to wield martial law judiciously, and because we should end the suffering of the civilians of Marawi now and bring them back home. Mr. President, I voted no.
Thank you, Senator Ontiveros. Majority Leader?
Senator Gatchalian, Mr. President.
Senator Gatchalian is recognized.
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I voted to extend the implementation of martial law in Mindanao until December 31 of 2017. And let me just briefly explain my vote. The reports given by the executive branch support the findings that despite the intensified military operations, they have not completely quelled the armed conflict in Marawi City. In fact, there are scattered armed groups not only in Marawi City, but in other parts of Mindanao. Necessity creates the conditions for martial law and at the same time limits its scope. With the conditions existing in Marawi City, it is clear that public safety demands that the people of Mindanao be secured and protected from the terror and chaos of this new breed of rebellion through whichever legal means necessary. We must give the President ample latitude to exercise his discretion in choosing the proper medicine to cure the cancer of terrorism, even if it may be the extraordinary remedies of martial law and suspension of the privilege of the writ. Looking forward, it is evident that the rehabilitation and recovery of Marawi City cannot truly begin until the rebel groups and their networks are completely destroyed. The roots of violent extremism have to be removed so that we may undertake in earnest the challenge of sustaining inclusive development in Marawi City and surrounding provinces. Allowing our government to exercise these extraordinary but limited powers now is a small sacrifice compared to the dire economic and security consequences of allowing extremism to take seed and spread throughout our country. We need to trust that with sufficient time and latitude, the administration will only do what is necessary and just to secure a prosperous and safe future for our country. To this end, I concur with the President's assessment that there is a necessity to continue the implementation of martial law until December 31 to achieve the paramount objective of restoring peace under civilian authority. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Gatchalian. Majority Leader?
Senator Subiri, Mr. President.
Senator Subiri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise here not just as senator representing the Republic, but a senator representing the region of Mindanao. It is quite frustrating and disheartening that all the gains of economic development that we have had in Mindanao throughout these years has been shattered by these extremist terrorists out to destroy the very freedoms that we are enjoying today in this chamber. Even those protesters who we respect and were shouting in the high heavens earlier, those same protesters under the regime of the Daesh would have been lined up outside and immediately shot in the head. As a peace-loving Mindanaoan, Mr. President, I support our President's fight against the terrorists who know no creed, no religion, no law. The extension of martial law is necessary as the threat is still there. It is still ever present, Mr. President. And once Marawi is free from these terrorists, the harder part of rehabilitating and rebuilding will begin. Mr. President, the builders could be under constant threat by bombings and firefights similar to what had happened in Iraq and in Afghanistan, where these contractors were always being bombarded, killed, and kidnapped. We must protect these areas from this type of terrorism. And why the whole Mindanao, you may ask, Mr. President? Saan po nahuli ang mga maute terrorist? Hindi ba po nahuli sila papunta ng Davao City? Hindi ba po nahuli sila papunta ng Zamboanga City? Hindi ba po nahuli sila papunta ng Cagayan de Oro City? Because the boundaries are so porous, we need to protect all our citizens from the spread of this disease of terrorism. I vote yes. We from Mindanao vote yes for the extension of martial law for our ultimate dream of long-lasting peace. Mabuhay po ang
Thank
Mindanao.
you, Senator Subiri. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Senator Angara, Mr. President.
Senator Angara is recognized.
Salamat, Majority Leader, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, mga ginagalang nakasama. Habang tayo'y nagdedebate rito, pinaglalaban po at binibuwis po ng ating mga kasundaluhan at ng kapulisan yung kanilang buhay para ipagtanggol yung ating karapatan para magdebate rito. Yan po ang nakasalalay dito sa usapin ngayon. Yung kalayaan natin na pinagtanggol sa Tirad Pass, sa Biak na Bato, sa Corridor at sa Bataan. Kaya po sana kung kaya natin, suklian naman po natin yung ating kasundaluhan ng konting suporta at saklolo. At palagay ko dito sa very overwhelming vote na pinakita po natin sa Senado at sa House of Representatives, sana mabigyan po ng sigla yung ating sandatahang lakas at nagpapasalamat po tayo sa kanila at dahil sa kanila, pinagtanggol po nila yung kanilang ating karapatan at ang ating kalayaan na pinaghirapan po ng ating mga ninuno. Mabuhay po ang malayang Pilipinas. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Angara. And thank you for sticking to the time limit.
And finally, Senator Richard
Majority Leader.
Gordon, Mr. President.
Senator Gordon? Okay, Senator Gordon is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, nobody wants martial law. That's the nature of man. Nobody wants strong, leadership that can affect our rights. But this was not something that we wanted. It was placed upon us. And our soldiers have died, to be sure, 100 have died. And many civilians have died, as well as many of our countrymen on the other side. And so today, I have to remind everyone that we vote on a very vital issue today, that we have to make sure that we acquit ourselves before our constituents. So we think of that soldier just a while ago who came here wounded with a sling on his arm. We have to think of how he is exposed to these challenges that he has to fight, even kill. I'm sure he doesn't want to kill his fellow man. I'm sure he bleeds when he's hurt or he bleeds when he sees his fellow soldier fall. But nonetheless, let us remind ourselves that martial law had to be imposed. Suddenly, there was a fight in Malawi, and the president had to act. This is about containment, Mr. President. We have to contain the malady. We don't want it to spread anymore to any other part of the country. Unfortunately, in Mindanao, as you can see, many of the evacuees themselves do not go to the evacuation centers, but to their relatives. I am not saying that they will do so. Having said that, Mr. President, it is important to realize that as we vote today, we can always, under the Constitution, withdraw support for martial law. The President can be asked in 60 days, we can ask for justification. And if that is to be, and even he can withdraw martial law if he feels that there is no more justification. But we all know that's hope. But the reality is we don't want to be a Syria. We don't want to be an Iraq. It started with little things like this and then spread out and created destruction and havoc and death and destroyed nations. So, Mr. President, I reluctantly vote yes. And on that basis, Mr. President, God bless the Philippines.
Thank you, Senator Gordon. Majority Leader, anybody else? Wala na. Okay. So we turn over to the
Yes, Mr. President, we'd like
the
to
House
turn
of
it over to
Representatives.
The Majority Leader.
Wait. Excuse.
Yes, I mentioned earlier that the names of the members of the Senate who wish to submit their
Yes, yes, sir.
explanation of votes.
Yes, sir. So we turn over now to the House of Representatives, the explanation of votes.
The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, good afternoon. I move that we recognize the Honorable Lito Atienza to explain his vote.
Before I recognize Honorable Lito Atienza, I remind the members of the House on our Rule 8, Section 14, that you are only have 1 minute to explain your vote. Honorable Lito Atienza from Buhay Party List,
Mr.
recognized.
Speaker, Senate President, I voted no simply because of what we have already stated publicly earlier. We don't believe that this is the intention of the present Constitution to allow an extension of 150 days. Kung ang extension po ay 60 days as mandated, clearly mandated by the Constitution, we would have gladly supported it. Another extension later on, it would have merited again our support. Pero extending it for 150 days is unthinkable if we would want to strengthen our Constitution. Ito pong ating ginawa ngayon, ngayong hapong ito, binigyan tayo ng pagkakataon upang palakasin ang ating demokrasya, palakasin at patatagin ang ating saligang batas. But we opted not to do that, not to answer to the challenge, and many of us just went with the flow. So I congratulate those who stood pat to defend the Constitution, because we all swore to respect, protect, and defend the Constitution. Wala po sa ating saligang batas ang 150 days extension, which is much longer than the limitation of 60 days. Lahat pong ito ginawa
Let's
natin,
wind up, Honorable Atienza.
lahat pong ito ginawa natin ay nakatala sa ating kasaysayan, and let history be the judge of how we reacted to the challenges of today. Maraming salamat po.
The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the Honorable Bordado to explain his vote.
Honorable Bordado is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, when President Rodrigo Duterte declared martial law and suspended the writ of Habeas Corpus in Mindanao on May 23, 2017, I openly expressed my support, albeit hoping that the Malawi crisis would end as soon as possible. Of course, I commend the armed forces of the Philippines for doing everything to end the crisis, with many soldiers and policemen even making the ultimate sacrifice. However, today, Mr. Speaker, after intently listening to the deliberations, including the manifestations of the resource persons and the ensuing interpellations, I believe that President Duterte, with the full backing of the Filipino people, as shown by his exceptionally high approval and trust ratings, can marshal all the powers and resources at his disposal without resorting to martial law. I am therefore voting no to the extension of martial law in Mindanao, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the Honorable Bravo to explain his vote.
Honorable Bravo is recognized.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Mr. Speaker, the cooperative sector supports development at all levels, across sectors, across regions. The cooperative sector advocates peace, cooperation, economic progress, and socio-cultural development. I vote yes to the proposed extension of Proclamation 216 or the martial law in Mindanao, as I believe that this will facilitate the government efforts toward resolution of the conflict in the region. We trust in the wisdom and leadership of President Duterte, as we believe that he only wants to protect our brothers and sisters in Mindanao and whole country against the terror and chaos that this armed conflict brings. We wish for the faster recovery of affected communities, and this will only happen if the armed conflict is fully resolved. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the Honorable Brosas. Explain her vote.
Honorable Brosas recognized.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, amid the military's failure to substantiate its reports of rebellion across Mindanao and threats to public safety with factual basis, the martial law declaration itself stands out as the clear and present danger to the people of Mindanao. Martial law has licensed the full-blown militarist approach that has displaced over 300,000 families in Malawi and thousands more in the Mindanao provinces. Ibig sabihin lang, ang martial law ang pinakamalaking panganib at banta sa kaligtasan at karapatan ng ating mga kababayan. Paano kung gayon magiging lunas ang isang bagay na lalong nagpapalala sa sakit? Mr. Speaker, mabigat sa puso ang naging pagbabahagi kanina ng isa nating kapatid na Moro, kaugnay ng sinapit ng mga kababaihan at batang Maranao sa ilalim ng martial law. At nakakagalit na sabihin ng mga pinuno ng militar na walang human rights violations. Talaga po bang nagkaroon ng comprehensive assessment on the ground? Mahirap po itong paniwalaan. Mr. Speaker, sinabi kanina ni AFP Chief of Staff Eduardo Anyo na ang pag-secure ng kaligtasan ng mga sibilyan,
Honorable Rosas.
ang primaryang objective sa Mindanao. Paano tayo maniniwala sa sinasabi na safety ng civilians ang primary objective ng martial law? Mr. Speaker, isinasagawa rin ng airstrikes sa North Cotabato at Bukidnon, kung saan wala namang aktwal na rebelyon. At kahit walang aktwal na rebelyon, may isang sibilyan ang nasawi bunga ng airstrikes at ilang daang pamilyang nagsilikas. Pero walang napatay o nahuli na terorista sa North Cotabato at Bukidnon. Is the military overstretching the claim of rebellion merely to justify its intensified attacks on the people? Malinaw po na sibilyan ang pangunahing apektado sa isinagawang operasyon na ito. May mga pangalan at mukha ang biktima ng martial law sa Mindanao. Samantala, tila nanguhula ang militar sa ulat nitong rebelyon at banta sa seguridad ng publiko. Sinasabi rin kailangan umano ng martial law
May request
extension.
the lady.
Yes, continue na po. Para sa stability for reconstruction and rehabilitation, gusto kong idiin na hindi konstitusyonal na batayan para magpataw at mag-extend ng proklamasyon ng martial law. Mr. Speaker, Congress should put an end to the extraordinary powers that is martial law and the grave abuses that come with it. Malinaw ang tindig ng Gabriela Women's Party dito. No to martial law extension, defend human rights, at kailangang may managot sa mga abuso ng karapatang pantao sa ilalim ng martial law.
The Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the Honorable Cagas. Explain her vote.
Honorable Cagas recognized.
The Honorable Cagas, Mr. Speaker, is not around. With that, I move that we, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the Honorable Casilaw. Explain his vote.
Honorable Casilaw is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President. Sa buong araw po ng pagtalakay sa sulat ng Pangulo sa Kongreso na humihingi ng ekstensyon ng martial law sa Mindanao, tila mula mismo sa mga pahayag ni Secretary Lorenzana at General Anyo sa pagpapatupad ng martial law ay gumagawa sila ng kanilang bagong sariling batas. Sa pagpapatupad ng martial law tulad ng kanilang binanggit na guidelines, salungat sa anumang sinasaad ng saligang batas sa Article 7, Section 18. Tila hindi pa sila nakakaalpas sa kanilang orientasyong martial law noong 1972 na kinuha ang batayan ng 1937 at 1972 Constitution na kung saan mayroong probisyong imminent danger. Tinanggal na ang probisyong imminent danger sa kasalukuyang konstitusyon at kailangang may aktwal na pag-alsa para ito'y pumasa sa tinatakda ng saligang batas. Inaamin mismo ni Secretary Lorenzana na ang nakakalat ng mga membro ng MAUTE, ASG, AKP sa mahigit 1,000 katao na lamang sa ilang mga probinsya ng Mindanao ay kasalukuyang may kakayanan at rekurso ang ating gobyerno para sila isupilin. Pangalawa, talagang hindi pa nakakaalpas o nakakawala sa makalumang orientasyon ng batas militar ang kasalukuyang tagapagtupad ng batas militar sa pagsabing walang human rights violation.
Honorable Casilaw, please wind up.
Oo, kailangan kundinahin at panagutin. Patapos na po. Ang ginawa ng MAUTE, Abu Sayyaf sa mga sibilyan. Ngunit sana, kalintulad din ang ating pagkundina at pagpapanagot sa mga ginawa at ginagawa at gagawin ng mga nagpapatupad ng batas militar. Sa ganito, maaring ito ay popular sa kasalukuyan. Sa umpisa, ganito din ang popularidad ng martial law noong panahon ng 1972. Ngunit namulat ang sambayanan, lumaban at binigo. Muli, ang martial law kasalukuyan ay mabibigo. Maraming salamat po.
The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the Honorable Franz Castro.
Honorable Franz Castro is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mga kapwa ko kinatawan, ako ay bumoto laban sa pagpapalawig pa ng martial law at suspensyon ng pribilehiyo ng Writ of Habeas Corpus sa Mindanao. Hindi na dapat pang tumagal ang batas militar na 2 buwan nang nagpapahirap sa ating mga kababayan. Simula't simula pa lamang aniristo na namin sa makabayan na ang martial law ay walang batayan. Hanggang sa ngayon ay walang napapatunayang aktwal na rebelyon sa buong Mindanao. Rebelyon at invasion lamang ang pinapayagan ng konstitusyon na maging dahilan sa pagpataw at pag-extend ng martial law. Hindi lawless violence, drugs o iba pang criminal activities o ang hindi nilinaw na terminong peace spoilers. Hindi pa rin napapatunayan sa isa pang hinihingi ng konstitusyon na public safety requires it o kapag kinakailangan ng kaligtasan ng pamayanan. Isa pa, malawak at mabigat na pinsalang dinulot ng martial law sa inosenteng mamamayan sa Mindanao. Ang tinutukoy sa request ng Presidente na matinding pagkasira ng Marawi ay dahil sa marahas na military operation at walang patlang na aerial bombing sa mga sibilyan na komunidad.
Please wind up, Honorable Castro.
Patapos na po. Ayon mismo sa datos ng gobyerno, lagpas kalahating milyon ng inosenteng Moro, Lumad at Kristiyano na ating kapatid ang internally displaced o sa pilitang bumabakwit. Halos kalahati nito ay di bababa sa 15 taong gulang. Winawasiwas ang kamay na bakal na batas militar laban sa buhay at kabuhayan ng ating mga kababayang sibilyan. Sinunog ang mga eskwelahan, pinuto ng pampublikong serbisyo at pribadong business. Libo-libo sa ating mga kababayan ang naging biktima ng human rights violation. Sa kasong ito, ang piniling lunas ay naging mas masahol pa sa sakit na sinasabing kailangang lutasin. Hindi na solusyonan ang martial law ang problemang dulot ng extremist groups sa Marawi. Bagkus ay nagdulot lamang ito ng mas marami pang suliranin, dala ng mahigpit na paggalaw ng mga mayan, maging pagibigay ng batayang serbisyo. Ika nga, hinuhuli mo lang ang daga, sinunog mo na ang buong bahay. Maraming salamat, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Senate President.
The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the Honorable Crisologo.
Honorable Crisologo is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I voted yes to the extension of martial law simply because I do not want the rebellion to spread to Manila. I believe that the President, with all his intelligence resources, sees that there is a need for the extension of martial law. Otherwise, had we not extended it, the rebellion might not be quelled and it might spread to Metro Manila. So siguro, yung mga bumoto ng no, gusto nilang maranasan siguro rebellion sa Manila, magkagulo. Kaya po, we're not in a position to assess the situation because we do not have the proper intelligence. President Duterte has all the intelligence needed, and he sees that there is a need to extend martial law, and we must grant it to them. Sabi ko kanina mga kumontra sa martial law ay linalabag ho natin ang konstitusyon. What constitution are we talking about? If we are already overrun by the rebels, anong konstitusyon pa? Wala na tayong gobyerno pagka ma-overrun tayo sa rebels. So, Sir Speaker, I believe that we were right in granting the President the extension of martial law. And I voted yes. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the Honorable De Jesus.
Honorable De Jesus is recognized.
Malinaw ang aking batayan sa posisyon at pagboto ng no. Naniniwala kaming hindi solusyon ang todong militaristikong tugon sa nagaganap na kaguluhan sa Mindanao. Hindi nagapi ng halos isang dekadang imposisyon ng martial law sa ilalim ni Marcos ang sinasabing banta ng revolusyonaryo at ilang rebelyong Moro. Libo-libo ang pinaslang, dinakip, tinorture at samut-sari pang represyon, subalit lalong lumakas ang digmang bayan at nanganak ng iba't ibang grupo ng rebelyong Moro. Bakit? Dahil nakaugat ang rebelyon sa matinding kahirapan, kawalan ng katarungang panlipunan at pagigiit ng karapatang magpasya sa sarili. At hindi kailanman tinutugunan ng tuloy-tuloy na pambobomba at todong militarisasyon ng mga komunidad ang mga batayang suliraning ito. Sa aktwal, lalong sinisindihan ng mga abuso ng martial law ang batayan ng rebelyon at ligalig sa Mindanao. Sa pag-aproba ng ekstensyon ng batas militar sa Mindanao, pinili ng Kongreso na maging bulag sa mahalagang aral ng kasaysayan na ito. Masahol pa lumabas sa interpelasyon na wala naman talagang aktwal na rebelyon sa iba pang bahagi ng Mindanao. Malaki ang pagkakaiba ng threat of rebellion sa actual rebellion. Sa mga paliwanag ni na Martial Law Administrator Lorenzana at
Pakiusap
Implementer
po
General
at nakalampas na
Anyo,
ako sa minuto.
inamin na wala naman talagang actual rebellion at sa iba pang susing syudad sa Mindanao. Even the President's letter recommending the extension of martial law, ang iba po ay haka-haka sa pamamagitan ng paggamit niya ng are likely, possible. Kanina rin sinabi na zero ang human rights violations kahit napakahaba na ng dokumentasyon ng mga abuso sa ilalim ng martial law. At kami po sa Makabayan ay nag-file na rin ng resolusyon seeking an inquiry on the documented rights violations in Bukidnon, North Cotabato, and other parts of Mindanao. Mr. Speaker, hindi pwedeng magbulag-bulagan ng Kongreso sa kawalan ng mga konkretong batayan ng rebelyon at threat to public safety. At lalong hindi pwedeng sang-ayunan ng Kongreso ang pagpapahaba ng deklarasyon ng batas militar sa Mindanao na walang pag-internalize ng human rights violations sa ilalim ng martial law. For this reason, I am strongly voting against the extension of martial law in Mindanao. Tama na ang todo gyera laban sa mamamayan. Itigil na ang airstrike sa Malawi at sa marami pang panig ng Mindanao. Harapin ng administrasyon ang pangmatagalang solusyon sa matinding kahirapan at pang-aapi na siyang ugat ng digmaang nagaganap. Maraming
Majority
salamat.
Leader.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, I move that we recognize the Honorable Delmar.
Honorable Delmar is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Reports submitted by the Executive Department and military officials, plus the media reports which has been coming in for about 60 days, likewise, clearly indicate the existence of sufficient factual basis for the extension of martial law and suspension of the privilege of habeas corpus. Now, this, Mr. Speaker, would show that my voting yes instead of no was really the proper thing to do, because voting no would have meant the non-extension of the martial law proclamation and suspension of privilege of habeas corpus, even for the 60 days. Because this representation, Mr. Speaker, really wanted to confine, to confine the extension to 60 days. But if the no vote had won, we would not have, tomorrow we will not have martial law anymore. And there is this is still vitally needed to quell the terrorism, still very strong in Malawi and Lanao del Sur, which if we didn't act this fast, could have spread and engulfed the entire Mindanao area, and God forbid, spread to our Visayas area and Luzon. So these are the points I would like to express to the Speaker. But lastly, I would request the executive officials and we in Congress to continue to be vigilant against possible abuses by martial law and suspension of the privilege of habeas corpus implementers. Thank you.
The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the Honorable Kit Belmonte. Explain his vote.
Honorable Belmontes recognized.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, I voted no on the extension of martial law for 150 days. While I see the need to give further support to the armed forces and to the National Civilian Police, I do not agree to the extension of martial law for 150 days and the corresponding suspension of the privilege of writ of habeas corpus over the whole of Mindanao. To do so would normalize the environment of military rule reserved only for the most extraordinary of times. To do so may set a dangerous precedent of normalizing authoritarianism. To do so may have the effect of destroying the very institutions we have sworn to preserve. Paano kung masanay tayo, Mr. Speaker? Paano kung gawing indefinite ang martial law? Paano kung sa susunod na mga may konting dahilan ay buong Pilipinas na ang ipasok nila sa martial law? Paano kung masanay uli ang AFP at makalimutan nila ang self-restraint at ang respect for human rights dahil nasanay na uli sila sa unlimited power? By resorting to this extraordinary solution of martial law, aren't we falling into the trap created for us by the terrorists, the trap mismong gusto nilang mahulog tayo? How many communities will we transform into war zones? How many children will have fallen back from their education? How many families will have been displaced and forced away from their homes? How has the Maranao culture and heritage been affected? How many more recruits are we making for the extremists and the terrorists? My district is home to the Salaam Mosque compound, the area with the largest population of Muslims in Quezon City, residents of which have families, friends, and loved ones in Mindanao, and whose hearts remain in Mindanao. Echoing the sentiments of my constituents, Filipinos who love this nation and its people, we want the killing, the fighting to stop. We should focus on peace as soon as possible, Mr. Speaker. It is time to recover, it is time to rebuild, it is time to heal. Tindog, Marawi. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Majority Leader. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the Honorable Ilago. Explain her vote.
Honorable Ilago is recognized.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, Kabataan Party List vehemently opposes the extension of martial law and the suspension of the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus, as this will only subject Mindanao and the nation to greater and graver human rights abuses and offensive operations against the Moro, Lumad, and the people of Mindanao. Numerous daily airstrikes and bombings have displaced civilians in their hundreds of thousands. Heightened military presence in Lumad and other communities have caused their recent evacuation and suspension of classes in community schools. Attacks against peasants, community leaders, and unsuspecting civilians have stepped up. Rape threats hound women, and harassment and illegal detentions increase in number as the army usurped power over the Mindanao landscape. Martial law and its imminent extension, and now its extension, has been continuously prodded by U.S. imperialism in cohorts with their operatives in the AFP and PNP in its desperate attempt to consolidate control in an ever unstable economic and political landscape in the country and in the Asia-Pacific region. It will also further give the AFP control over suppressing information through contradictory statements and fake news. We also condemn the arrest of the Kabataan 8, or the 8 youth leaders who launched their rightful call to condemn the increased all-out offensives under martial law, especially the recent evacuation of Lumad communities, as vocalized by the community teachers of Al-Qadev. By answering the dissent with arrests and harassments, the state has exposed its grave hunger to enact martial law. The heightened offensive of the state will not quell, but will only further incite the resistance of the Moro and Lumad and other peoples. For as long as the state is stubborn on answering the root causes of poverty and crisis, the Moro Lumad and other minorities will continue their
Please wind
struggle
up.
for self-determination. The people thus will continue to march for their aspiration for a just and peaceful society, a struggle that cannot be achieved by a full-blown military rule. Thank you, Mr. President.
The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the Honorable Lagman to explain his vote.
Honorable Lagman is recognized.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I voted no for the following reasons. First, there is no sufficient factual basis for any extension in the same manner that there was no adequate factual anchorage for the original declaration of martial law under Proclamation number 216. What is happening in Malawi City is a lawless violence amounting to terrorism, but not actual rebellion. The President and his subalterns failed to sufficiently show that the element of culpable political purpose of the terrorists exists. Second, the coverage of martial law cannot be extrapolated to the whole of Mindanao, where there is no actual rebellion, as admitted by no less than the martial law administrator, Defense Secretary Lorenzana. Third, the safeguard of the Constitution on the duration of martial law is to impose a limited period. Consequently, the original imposition of martial law should not be beyond 60 days. It stands to reason that any extension should not be more than 60 days. Because of the limited time, I reserve my right to submit an extended explanation for the journal, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Lagman.
Before I sit, Mr. Speaker, that is not part of my explanation, I would earnestly request the leadership of the Senate and of the House to require the Secretary of National Defense as Administrator of Martial Law and the Chief of Staff, General Anyo, as Implementer of Martial Law to submit to the House as well as to the Senate official copy of the recommendation made by them to the President for the extension of martial law. That record is not part of what we have, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President.
Noted. The Majority
Mr.
Leader.
President, Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the Honorable Garin to explain his vote.
Honorable Garin is recognized.
The Philippine government have tried almost everything. And the people of the Philippines, we have tried almost everything. Every form of democratic governments, every technocrat's ideas, every decrees and amendments, but sometimes apparently the direction of our action still seems do not provide necessary solutions. But set in the hopelessness of things and events, there are some words that says, there has got to be rain for it is all sun. And there's got to be bitterness to be able to taste how sweet is sweet. And there's got to be evil to find out how really good is good. And those words set me to think, and I concluded that the better action should be to look for the goodness in every creation, in men and in reality. But in these times, ladies and gentlemen, individual convenience must give way to the collective good. I voted yes because the government should be given a free hand to restore order in Malawi.
The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the Honorable Rocamora to explain his vote.
Honorable Rocamora is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I find that I might not be able to fully explain my vote within 1 minute, so I hope to file a written explanation.
Thank you, Honorable Rocamora. The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the Honorable Harry Roque to explain his vote. Since the Honorable Roque is not around, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the Honorable Xiao for his explanation.
Honorable Xiao is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I represent Iligan City, wherein majority of the IDPs are relocated. Iligan overwhelmingly agrees with the martial law declaration for Mindanao. Many of us here do not realize that there is a synergy between my city and Malawi. What happens to them greatly affects us since we are only 30 minutes away from them. If Malawi has been caught flat-footed because of this event, so are we in Iligan. We do not know when the siege will end. We do not know when and which city will be the target of these terrorist groups. As one who cares for my people and the welfare of the city, we welcome the extension of martial law. To date, investment for Iligan is in a standstill.
Please wind up.
Even investors who are interested to come in has postponed or has stalled their entry. It is because of these matters that we in our lone district in Iligan feel that the extension of martial law would be to our greater advantage. We would like to commend our police and AFP forces for maintaining the peace and order in my city under these trying times. We also extend the same commendation to all agencies which has joined our military and police forces in these efforts. I carry the sincere stand of my people to extend martial law because we trust our President that he will yield his power for its judicious use and for the greater interest of the people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the Honorable C. Alvarado.
Honorable C. Alvarado is recognized.
Maraming salamat po, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker. Ang inyo pong abang lingkod ay sumusuporta sa ating mahal na Pangulo, sa kapulisan, sa kasandaluhan, at lahat ng naglilingkod sa ating inang bayan na naglalayong mapanatili at maayos at mapayapang mapamuhay ang lahat ng mamayan. Naniniwala ako na may sapat na batayan upang palawigin pa ang martial law. Subalit nakikiusap ako na tapusin ito bago sa ika-20 ng Disyembre 2017 upang bigyan ng pagkakataon ang lahat na gunatain at ipagdiwang ang Kapaskuhan. Mapait na karanasan ang dulot ng kaguluhan sa Malawi. Angkop man ang ginagawang pagtugon ng pamahalaan dito, kabilang na ang proklamasyon ng martial law sa buong Mindanao, subalit sa aking paniniwala ay hindi na dapat ito paabutin pa hanggang katapusan ng 2017. Nakikiusap ako na tapusin na ang lahat ng misyong kaugnay ng pagsupil sa kaguluhan at wakasan ang martial law bago ang December 30 o bago ang December 20, 5 araw bago ang Pasko. Sa ganitong paraan ay mabibigyan ng pagkakataon ng lahat ng Musliman o hindi na maramdaman ang pagmamahalan at pagkakaisa na nakapaloob sa pagdiriwang ng Kapaskuhan. Dagdag dito, ang ating mga kapatid na Muslim ay malayang makakalahok. Yes, Mr. Speaker, sandali na lang po. Makakalahok sa lahat ng bentahan at kalakalan sa merkado tuwing Kapaskuhan. Yun lamang po at kompleto po ang suporta ng unang distrito ng Bulacan sa ating Pangulo. Maraming salamat po, Mr. Speaker. Maraming salamat po, Mr. President.
The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the Honorable Tino.
Honorable Tino is recognized.
Maraming salamat, Mr. Speaker. Bumoto po ako ng no dahil una, walang batayan, sapat na batayan ayon sa konstitusyon ang extension ng martial law at suspension ng Writ of Habeas Corpus. Malinaw po na umiiral ng buo at 100%, walang bawas, walang kulang, ang gobyernong sibilyan, no, maging antas national o lokal sa kabuuan ng Mindanao. Kaya kailangan pong itaguyod ng Kongresong ito ang prinsipyo ng civilian supremacy over the military. Pangalawa po, bumoto ako ng no, alang-alang sa mahigit kalahating milyon na kababayan natin na karamihan ay Muslim na napilitang lumikas, no, at ngayon ay nasa gitna ng humanitarian crisis. Totoo po, dapat labanan at sugpuin ang terrorist acts ng Abu Sayyaf at iba pa sa Malawi, pero kailangan din natin kilalanin na kaya po may humanitarian crisis ay dahil po sa all-out war approach ng Duterte administration sa ilalim ng martial law. Ang pambobomba, ang aerial bombardment, ang pangunahing dahilan kung bakit meron tayong humanitarian crisis. Huling punto po, hindi po solusyon ang martial law sa problema ng armed rebellion sa Mindanao. Yan na po ang tinuro ng ating kasaysayan. Only political solution, kailangan po tugunan ang kahirapan, trabaho, edukasyon, kalusugan, katarungan. Hindi po martial law ang kailangan ng Mindanao. Kaya po bumoto ako ng no. Maraming salamat.
The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the Honorable Tugna.
Honorable Tugna is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Senate President, at the outset, this representation would like to state that 3 members of the House have given me their respective minutes. Mr. Speaker, upon evaluation of the events that transpired after the issuance of Proclamation number 216, the current situation in Malawi City and threats to major cities in Mindanao, especially in the western part and central Mindanao, SIBAC Party List supports President Duterte's call for the extension of martial law. And considering that the Mauti Group, Abu Sayyaf, BIFF, and other groups have united to sow terror, it will take a longer period of time for the military to fully restore public order. Ensuring that peace is restored in Mindanao and that public safety is protected is not only a battle for law enforcement and for the military, but for all of us Filipinos. We will not let terrorist groups take hold of our territory in order to establish their own, perpetuate crimes, and instill fear among our citizens and disrupt our orderly lives. Thus, SIBAC Party List supports the call of the President and votes yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the Honorable Velarde.
Honorable Velarde is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. President, I voted yes to the extension of the declaration of martial law and the suspension of the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus in the whole island of Mindanao up to December 31, 2017 on the following basis. The phenomenon of extremism and violence of the Motifs is a new experience not only for our security establishment but also for our political institutions. Terrorism surfaced its ugly head in Malawi and may also surface in other cities or places in any part of Mindanao. It does mean that if we defeat them in Malawi, which we will surely defeat them in Malawi, but this will not negate the fact that it may rise again in other parts of Mindanao. Terrorism is like a hydra that rears its ugly heads anywhere and anytime in Mindanao. The military has reported that 4 barangays are still infected or controlled by the Motifs, but objective of defeating terrorism and rebellion of these extremists is made difficult by the porousness of the territory of Mindanao, and there is a need to control population mobility, to contain them and defeat them in a limited space or area to limit damage to lives and properties. Time is of the essence in addressing this kind of rebellion and extremism. This is a battle of decisiveness on the part of government. We do not have the luxury of time. The more we dilly-dally, the more lives and properties will be affected. And finally, it was explicitly expressed by the Secretary of National Defense, the Administrator of Martial Law, that the President of the Philippines will or may lift the proclamation of martial law when the expressed objectives are already attained at any time, even before the prescribed period. On the other hand, it is also a prerogative of the President of the Philippines to request another extension from Congress, meaning we cannot underestimate the problem and also doubt the wise judgment of the President. With the express request from the Executive to extend the declaration of martial law and suspension of the privilege of writ of habeas corpus from Congress is reaffirming the powers granted to Congress by the Constitution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the Honorable Villarin.
Honorable Villarin is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Senate President. Akbayan votes no for the following reasons. Martial law extension, though vested in Congress, gives a false appreciation and an unbridled application of the recent Supreme Court decision upholding the declaration of martial law. It is false, as martial law does not vest extra powers to the President. It does not give him steroids to counter terrorism, nor will it set aside the constitutional restrictions on such power, including the 60-day period for any and all consequent declarations. But it is an unbridled exercise of extraordinary power that strains our democratic institutions and the rule of law, giving the President sole discretion on matters of national security and public safety in the context of martial law eliminates checks and balances critical in a democracy.
Please wind up.
Martial law extension will only bring about creeping authoritarian rule. The martial law extension will also put our AFP as the martial law administrator to be desensitized against upholding civilian supremacy, and it may entice the AFP to cross the Rubicon to institutionalize military rule. I hope and I pray that this will not happen. Mr. Speaker, the effect of martial law is highly discriminatory to Muslims who are unduly suspected of terrorism, impinging on their freedoms to travel, to be secure in their abodes, or the right to establish homes anywhere without biases, right to education of the children, and access to basic services. It has proven that martial law has violated the rights of our internally displaced persons. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, to wind up, it is not true that martial law has no effect on business. The Davao City Chamber of Commerce, the Samal City Resort Operators Association, and other industries dependent on tourism has requested for a lifting of martial law. While cash crop exports, mining, and extractive businesses that have overseas markets are presently inelastic to martial law, it will have an effect on their businesses on the long run. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I hope that on this historic day, our vote will be remembered by our people that we did not vote to make martial law again another grim reminder in our history.
The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the Honorable Zarate.
Honorable Zarate is recognized.
Ginoong Speaker, mga kapwa mambabatas, no ang boto ng representasyong ito dahil para sa akin, hindi para sa kagalingan ng mamamayan ang pagpapalawig ng Proclamation 216 o ang deklarasyon ng batas militar sa buong Mindanao. Kalabisan ang pagpataw ng batas militar. Kalabisan ang suspensyon ng privilege of the writ of habeas corpus. Kalabisan na sakupin nito ang buong Mindanao. Kalabisan ang saklawin ng lahat ng mga armadong revolusyonaryong puwersang kumikilos sa Mindanao sa gitna ng usapang pangkapayapaan. lalong kalabisan ang extension o ang pagpapalawig ng batas militar. Hindi kailangan ang batas militar sa Mindanao man o sa buong bansa. Sa ligang prinsipyo at patakaran sa 1987 Constitution, ang pangingibabaw ng kapangyarihang sibilyan sa kapangyarihang militar. Bunga ng mapait na karanasan ng mamamayan sa martial law ng diktadurang Marcos, tiniyak ng saligang batas na may mga limitasyon at hangganan ang kapangyarihang magdeklara ng batas militar. Bahagi dito ang paglalatag ng mga kondisyon at taning sa pag-iral ng batas militar. Bakit kailangan magdeklara ng martial law sa buong Mindanao at palawigin pa ito kung ang sinasabing pag-aalsa ng mga grupong Mauti o Dawla Islamia, AKP at ang ASG ay nasa 3 barangay na lamang ng Marawi at lubusan ng napapahina batay mismo sa sulat ng Pangulong Duterte at ng ulat ng militar ngayong araw. Ayon sa saligang batas, rekisito sa pagdideklara ng martial law, di lamang ang aktual na pag-iral ng rebelyon at pananakop, kundi ang pagkakaroon ng malaking banta sa kaligtasan ng publiko. Hindi na ba gumagana ang mga local government units at hudikatura sa ibang probinsya gaya ng Davao, Cagayan o Bukidnon, Surigao at iba pang lugar na kailangan ng palitan ng pamumuno nito ng militar? Hindi na ba kayang gampanan ng LGUs ang pangangalaga sa kaligtasan ng publiko ng mamamayang kanilang nasasakupan? Laan ng imposisyon ng batas militar.
Please wind up.
Bilang huling tagapagsalita po, pwede pong i-wind up ko na lamang ito.
O sige po, yung pong para sa akin, ipinapasa ko na sa inyo.
Maraming salamat po, Ginoong Speaker. Ayon sa ating saligan batas, para tiyakin ang kaligtasan ng mamamayan, tungkulin ng pwersang militar ng gobyerno na sugpuin ang mga may tangkang gawa ng kapinsalaan ng ating mga kababayan. Pero sa halip na matiyak ang kaligtasan ng publiko, sa loob po ng 60 araw ng batas militar sa Mindanao, ito ay nagdulot ng malawakang dislokasyon, pananakot, kamatayan ng mga sibilyan at kahit na ng mga tropang militar. Maliban sa mga namatay at nasugatan sa labanan, marami ang naitalang paglabag ng karapatang pantao sa iba't ibang bahagi ng Mindanao, lalong-lalo na sa mga komunidad ng mga lumad at magsasaka. Halimbawa sa North Cotabato at sa Bukidnon. Ilang daan o ilang libong buhay pa ang mawawala o ilalagay natin sa kapahamakan sa pagpapatuloy ng all-out war at pamomomba bunga ng batas militar sa Mindanao. Huwag ho sana tayong maging bulag at bingi sa panawagan ng ating mga kababayang patuloy na nagdurusas sa mga evacuation centers. Nahihintatukan sa kanilang mga barangay at komunidad dahil sa karasang militar at walang habas na pamomomba bunga ng batas militar. Pangarap po ng mga bakwit na makabalik sa kanilang mga tahanan at muling makamumuhay ng tahimik. Hindi ito mangyayari sa pagpapalawig ng batas militar sa buong Mindanao o saan mang panig ng bansa. Bilang panghuli, Ginoong Speaker, para sa kapakanan, kagalingan at kaligtasan ng mamamayan sa Mindanao at sa buong bansa, dapat nang itigil at huwag nang palawigin pa ang batas militar. Kaya muli po, no ang boto ng bayan muna sa pagpapalawig ng batas militar. Maraming salamat po.
The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, that would be all for the House.
Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, for purposes of approving the journal of the special joint session, I move that on the part of the Senate, the Senate President be authorized to review and approve the journal of the special joint session on July 22, 2017, and that such approval shall be valid and effective for all purposes, as if the journal was approved directly by the Senate. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? The chair hears none on the part of the Senate. The motion of the Majority Floor Leader of the Senate is approved.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, on the part of the House of Representatives, I move that the Speaker be authorized to review and approve the journal of the joint session on July 22, 2017, and that such approval shall be valid and effective for all purposes, as if the said journal was approved directly by the House of Representatives.
There being no objection from the House of Representatives, The motion of the House Majority Leader for the approval of the journal of the joint session on the part of the House is hereby approved.
Mr. President, on the part of the Senate, I move that we adjourn the special joint session of Congress.
On the part of the Senate, the special joint session of Congress is adjourned.
Mr. Speaker, on the part of the House of Representatives, I move that we adjourn the special joint session.
On the part of the House of Representatives, a special joint session of Congress is hereby adjourned.